Sawadee-khap. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the event commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, assessing the 4 freedoms and trends in the next 25 years. We gathered here today to celebrate and reaffirm our commitment to these timeless principles that continue to guide us and inspire us. But before we begin with the procedures, I would like to inform you that the interpretation services are available for those who require them, and will be available in English, streamlined through the Facebook Live of the Faculty of Law. And additionally, for those who cannot join us in person, the live stream on Facebook is available. So you just search Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University on Facebook page, and the live will be on there. Then it's my great honor, before we begin, it's my great honor to welcome, to invite the Dean of the Faculty of Law on the stage to give the opening remarks. Please.
Sawadee-khap. Good morning. Professor 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧 Professor Dr. Nazila Gasnier, Attorney 𝗨𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗀, Dr. 𝗬𝗘𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗀 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗀 Dr. 𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗀 Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University, it is my privilege to welcome you to this momentous event commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Today we stand together to honor a document that has been a beacon of hope and a standard of equity for people around the globe. In the spirit of this declaration, our law school has always endeavored to be more than an institution of legal education. We are a community committed to serving society, a pillar of justice, and an advocate for human dignity. Our long-standing goal has always been to embed the principles of human rights into the heart of our curriculum, inspiring the next generation of legal professionals to carry this torch forward. We owe much gratitude to the legacy of our very own world-class Professor 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, who has been appointed as a special rapporteur to various UN mandates, as well as Dr. 𝗂𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, the first Thai representative to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, who has much experience in human rights education, international publications, and human rights advocacy. This event would not have been possible without the invaluable insights of our distinguished speakers and collaboration of our co-organizers. The Working Group for an ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism, Thailand Development Research Institute, National Human Rights Commission of Thailand. Your contributions are not just appreciated, they are fundamental to the success of today's discussions and beyond. As we reflect on the past and look forward to the future, let us recommit ourselves to the ideals enshrined in the UDHR. Let this anniversary be not just a celebration of what has been achieved, but a renewal of our collective commitment to uphold and advance human rights for all. Thank you, and I wish us all a successful and enlightening event.
Thank you very much, Dean Perina. Next, I would like to invite Dr. 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, Co-Chair of the Working Group for the ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism, please.
Sawadee-khap. Good morning. I'm speaking here not on behalf of the Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University, but as a co-chair of the Working Group for an ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism. This is an organization that I have been supporting or contributing to since 1998 on a voluntary basis. In fact, I succeeded Professor 𝗏𝗧𝗏 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, who was actually co-chair, the fourth co-chair of the working group. My co-chair from Malaysia, 𝗨𝗗𝗛𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, who is the former UN Special Rapporteur on the independence of lawyers, of judges and lawyers, sent his regret for not being able to be with us today due to his health condition. We members of the working group would like to extend our warm welcome to all of you, and also to thank the Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University, the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, and the Thailand Development Research Institute for co-organizing this event with us. I would also like to express our sincere gratitude to FNF, our longtime partners, which support financially not only today's event, but as I said, our long-time supporter. My thanks are also extended to the Pro-Rights Foundation, through which the Norwegian Center for Human Rights has also, supported from the University of Oslo, supporting this particular event. Who we are, some of you who are sitting here may not know the working group for an ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism. We are actually an informal coalition of individuals and groups from Southeast Asia, advocating for an effective and credible ASEAN human rights system in Southeast Asia, from 7 countries, with Secretariat based at the Human Rights Center Ateneo de Manila. Our Secretary General, R.P. Santiago, is sitting there. All of us, except only one staff of the Secretariat, are, as I said, volunteers, meaning we have been contributing to the working group on a pro bono basis purely. The adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in December 1948 is considered as a profound development in the world politics. It recognizes that individuals like us, not only states, are bearers of inalienable and inherent rights. How a government treats its people is a matter of legitimate international scrutiny. Such development, in many ways, is an accomplishment for humanity. 75 years later, it seems that this accomplishment is at risk, at least in my opinion. We have to jointly reflecting on how to realize the Roosevelt's vision of 4 freedoms delivered in 1941: freedom of speech and expression, freedom of religion and belief, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. I would like to thank all speakers for sparing their time to share with us their reflections and assessment of the state and conditions of the 4 freedoms. And we'll be looking forward to the next 25 years when what would be happening, how human rights would look like in the next 25 years when UDHR reaches 100th anniversary. With that, I would like to thank our speakers and, of course, all participants who are attending. I'm quite happy to see that we are all here, at least you're filling this room. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dr. 𝗟𝗵𝗂𝗏, for your warm opening remarks. Next, I would like to invite Kun Sayamon Kayurawong, Commissioner from the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand. Please, thank you.
สวัสดีท่านผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนะคะ Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, and all participants. It is a great pleasure for me to join all of you in this seminar series organized by the Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR. On behalf of the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting us co-host this event. The UDHR is a historic document that lays down the foundation for today's human rights work. It is the basis for the subsequent development of major human rights treaties that give legal force to the UDHR, especially the two covenants on civil and political rights and on economic, social, and cultural rights. This is to ensure that the rights and freedom recognized by the UDHR will turn into reality for all the people, no matter where they are. Although the UDHR has been existent for 75 years, human rights violations persist worldwide, driven by conflicts, discrimination, and the erosion of democratic values. The aim of today's seminar is to assess the four freedoms. The first two are freedom from fear and freedom from want. Freedom from fear means that one can lead a peaceful life without unlawful or arbitrary interference by a third person or by the state, and that one will receive fair treatment if accused of any wrongdoing. From the point of view of the NHRC, freedom from fear involves issues such as unlawful arrest, ill treatment of detained persons, include torture, temporary release of persons awaiting trial in criminal case, undue delay in criminal case, and intimidation to human rights defenders. There are the rights recognized in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or 𝗟𝗃𝗃𝗃. To ensure freedom from fear, we have advocated for due process, fair trials, prevention of torture, and enforce disappearance and champion the rights of human rights defenders. This we did even in security-sensitive areas like the southern border provinces. As for freedom from want, it mainly involves the rights guaranteed in the International Covenant for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, or ICESCR. The National Human Rights Commission, or NHRC, has advocated for the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to work, as well as access to health care and education. We have made serious efforts to address land conflicts in protected forest areas, while we approach the government action to enhance the land allocation system. We believe that faster solutions are required for overlapping areas between protected forests and existing communities. We also advocate for communal participation in resolving existing conflicts relating to land and natural resource management to ensure that economic development does not compromise human dignity or environmental well-being. The other two freedoms, freedom from expression and freedom of belief, are stipulated in Article 19 of the ICCPR. The freedom of expression is also closely linked to the right of peaceful assembly and the right of citizens to take part in the conduct of public affairs in Article 21 and 25. We have actively safeguarded the right to free speech, the freedom of the press, and freedom of peaceful assembly, recognizing their pivotal role in a vibrant democracy. Over the past few years, the NHRC has closely monitored political demonstrations and issue reports and recommendations to the government and concerned authorities. We stress the government's pivotal role in enabling, not obstructing, the exercise of these rights, which are also guaranteed by the Thai Constitution. In addition, we recognize the critical importance of meaningful participation in the pursuit of sustainable development. We consistently emphasize that transparency, accessibility to information, and genuine engagement with affected communities are pivotal in all development endeavors, public and private. We believe rectifying and fairly compensating any adverse impacts must be central to the responsible development. The journey towards the full and effective realization of the UDHR, 𝗟𝗃𝗄𝗏, and 𝗟SCR is still a long one. We are confident that through collaboration with all stakeholders, we can build a future where every voice is heard, every right is respected, and every individual thrives. Let's use this opportunity to rejuvenate the human rights agenda and guarantee that the UDHR continue to lead the way for future generations. I would like to conclude by thanking you all of you being here today. I hope that you will make the most of this opportunity to learn and grow and engage in fruitful discussion. And I wish you every success in this undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, 𝗂𝗖𝗵𝘂𝗹 from the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand. Next, I would like to invite Dr. 𝗂𝗘𝗂𝗵𝘂𝗧𝗏 President of the Thailand Development Research Institute.
Sawadee krab. Good morning. Economic development requires rights. In economic textbook, we teach about property rights, enforcement of contracts. But to have inclusive and sustainable development, it is necessary that we also need to have human rights protection. So the Thailand Development Research Institute is proud to be a partner to commemorate this really important event of the 75th anniversary of the UDHR. Thank you so much for engaging us.
Thank you very much, Dr. 𝗂𝗘𝗏 from the TDRI. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Maurice Klein-Brockhoff, Head of the Regional Office of Southeast and East Asia, 𝗏𝗏 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 Foundation, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm too tall for the microphone, as always, but I hope you can hear me well. On behalf of the 𝗏𝗏 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 Foundation for Freedom, I'd like to also warmly welcome you to the seminar today. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me a chance to briefly address you here today. Some of you may not be familiar with the 𝗏𝗏 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 Foundation and my organization. In Germany, where we are from, all parties which are represented in the German parliament have foundations, and my foundation is associated with the Free Democrat Party, Germany's Liberal Party. Other foundations from other parties of Germany are also here in Bangkok with offices, Konrad Adenauer, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Heinrich Böll, and the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Foundation. Now, we all share many values and we all promote democracy, but it's no coincidence that I'm up here today at a human rights event. We, as a liberal foundation, obviously promote liberalism, and at the core of liberalism are individual rights, those rights which are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is our focus here today, which we celebrate here today. Most articles and most sentences in that declaration start with the word everyone. It stresses that without exception, every human being has the rights which were declared in 1948. Now, since then, the scope of human rights has broadened, but we at FNF, we believe that individual human rights remain the core. They are non-negotiable. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a partner of today's seminar, because of our long-standing cooperation with the Regional Working Group for an ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism. Dr. Sripapa mentioned it earlier. Many members are here today. FNF and the working group have been cooperating since day one for more than 25 years now. I would like to thank the Malaysian National Working Group, which is part of it, for their role they played in making today's event here possible. The Regional Working Group over the many years has had successes and challenges. The group played an important, vital role leading up to the formation of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights in 2009. But Aisha's ineffectiveness, and this is a challenge, is frustrating. More than 10 years ago, the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration was passed, but that declaration also challenging because it lacks a commitment to individual rights. Both the declaration and 𝗟𝗄, including the terms of references, remain weak. So the regional working group has challenges for years to come. But I know the members. I know they will remain undeterred, and I know they will keep pushing, and I admire everyone involved. I'm just looking at you, 𝗟𝗄. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close by saying how much I look forward to today, to the keynotes and the panels. They will focus on 4 freedoms. They were mentioned before: freedom of religion and belief, freedom of expression, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And how fitting that we, the Foundation for Freedom, are part of it. I wish us all a great seminar, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moritz. Don't worry about the microphone. It was just to my height. All right, before we move on to the keynote address, we would like to invite distinguished speakers, keynote speakers, opening remarks on the stage for the group photo, please. Thank you very much. Now let's commence the keynote address. For the first keynote address, Dr. Sripapa will gladly introduce the first keynote speaker, please.
Thank you, Ajahn Pawat. Our first speaker is actually from the UK, which is about 7 hours behind us. It's currently, I guess, about almost 3 a.m. She was wanting to join us online, but because, as I said, because of 7 hours difference, she decided to send us a video. So we'll be showing her video after I just share you her brief introduction. Dr. Nazila Ghana is a professor of international human rights law at the Faculty of Law, University of Oxford. Among many other positions, she currently serves as Associate Director of the Oxford Human Rights Hub and is holder of the UN mandate as the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief. Please, our technician, could you kindly show her video for about 15 to 20 minutes? Thank you.
Dear colleagues and friends, it's a great honor to address this event marking the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I want to extend my sincere thanks to the law school at Chulalongkorn University for inviting me to speak, and I want to reiterate my regrets for not being able to join you in person due to clashing commitments. I really do wish I had been there with you. The 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was marked this month, calls on us to make ample space for reflection on achievements and the scale of challenges which remain before us in making human rights generally and freedom of religion or belief in particular a lived reality for all. The scale of the multiple interrelated crises that humanity currently faces are not lost on anyone present. But if we cast our minds back to 1948, the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights could scarcely have been further from the lived reality of the majority of the human family. Europe and North America were, of course, emerging from war and genocide, the likes of which the world had scarcely seen before. Much of the rest of the world remained under colonial domination, a context in which atrocities and dehumanization, often regrettably in the name of religious doctrine, were systematic realities. In this context, the content of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, however short, was radical, and this was reflected in the debate which surrounded it, as the 𝗨𝗏𝗶𝗴𝗀𝗀 reflect. And there should be little wonder that the debate was heated. Its adoption has sparked a process which over the last 75 years has seen practically every word of Article 18 come into greater, more nuanced and deeper meaning, reflecting its enthusiastic adoption by faith-based communities. And since then, indigenous peoples, human rights defenders, women and children rights movements, lawyers and diplomats and others across regions and cultures. The history actually, as reflected in the 𝗨𝗏𝗧, is fascinating because it does speak to and reinforce the cross-cultural and cross-faith support for Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Since then, freedom of religion or belief has found its way into treaty law under the 𝗖𝗍𝗂𝗵𝗂, which I'll discuss shortly, the American Declaration on the Rights and Duties of Man, the American Convention on Human Rights, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, just to name a few. And you know your sub-regional instruments far better than I. Its content has been elaborated in the 1981 Declaration on the elimination of all forms of discrimination and of intolerance based on religion or belief. And 𝗖𝗍𝗂𝗵𝗂𝗵 Article 18 has been interpreted and greatly clarified in General Comment 22 of the Human Rights Committee, and also in countless views, concluding observations, recommendations by the UN Human Rights Committee, other treaty bodies and regional human rights courts. And that is in addition to numerous constitutions and other laws the world over. These developments give victims of violations of freedom of religion or belief and those subjected to discrimination and marginalization on the basis of their religion or belief a language, a set of fora and rights where the violations of their inherent dignity can be seen and named as such, and in the best cases, also remedied. Now, the template of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights still very much guides efforts to ensure freedom of religion or belief around the world today. It starts with stating that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. We see that some 20 years later in the text of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, also in its Article 18, which only comes into force 30 years after the UDHR, it also uses very similar language. So here we see protection for thought, conscience, and religion on an equal basis. It's the realm of conscience that is being protected, irrespective of what kind of religion it is, whether it's a matter of conscience and thought that is non-religious, whether it believes in God, does not believe in God, all are put on an equal platform. The scope and inclusivity of the capture on an equal basis is still out of reach in most parts of the world today by people all around us. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18, goes on to say that this right includes freedom to change his religion or belief. Now, when we look at the 𝗖𝗍𝗂𝗵𝗂𝗵𝗂, Article 18, the language of change is not there. Instead, it says this right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice. Why was change of religion or belief no longer there? Because it's now during the drafting process of the 𝗖𝗍𝗂𝗵𝗂𝗵𝗂, there are far too many objections to it. Nevertheless, the right to have and to adopt implicitly protects change of religion or belief, which is more robustly in the language of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The UDHR also goes on to say that everyone also has the freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. The 𝗖𝗄𝗁 Article 18 has very similar language, confirming, as the UDHR did, that the freedom of religion or belief, which is an abbreviation for freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, is not just an individual and private freedom. It is something that is to be enjoyed in community with others and also in public. Now, the 𝗖𝗄𝗁 then goes on to add two things that the UDHR, that very sharp, short, but effective capture of the Article 18 of the UDHR did not go into detail on. The 𝗖𝗄𝗁 says that no one shall be subject to coercion which would impair his freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice. This aspect of the right, the right to have, adopt, or change religion or belief, therefore, is not subject to any restriction or limitation. But the 𝗖𝗄𝗁 clarifies that freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health, or morals, or the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. So limitation is possible on manifestation of religion or belief, but only under these exacting conditions prescribed by law and necessary. To prescribe by law and necessary has been read into proportionality and non-discrimination, and the least intrusive measure should be taken where absolutely necessary to restrict manifestation of religion or belief. We also note that in the 𝗖𝗄𝗁 Article 18, national security is not a ground for limitation of manifestation of religion or belief, and elsewhere in the 𝗖𝗄𝗁 in Article 4, we note that freedom of religion or belief as a whole is not subject to derogation, even in times of public emergency that threaten the life of the nation. So a very robust protection in the covenant as a whole. The final paragraph of Article 18 of the 𝗖𝗄𝗁 also recognizes that state parties undertake to have respect for the liberty of parents or legal guardians to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions, something that since the 80s, of course, has been complemented by the protection in the Convention on the Rights of the Child that children also enjoy freedom of religion or belief. Now, returning to our reflections on the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we must give ourselves space to recognize what a milestone the UDHR captured. Here we already saw just how much Article 18 of the UDHR has been foundational and what progress has been made since 1948 in the binding human rights treaties and mechanisms that have been adopted, something that was definitely not foreseeable in 1948. This recognition can be a source of hope and energy given the scale of the challenges which remain. I've had the privilege of being the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief over the last 16 months, and I've dedicated the first of my 2 thematic reports to similar reflection on what we have achieved and what remains to be achieved. The first of those reports was presented to the Human Rights Council in March 2023, and this took stock of the landscape of freedom of religion or belief at the international level, some 37 years after the establishment of this mandate. The second of my thematic reports, presented at the General Assembly in October 2023, complemented this by looking at freedom of religion or belief from the opposite angle, from a grassroots perspective, with a focus on the role of domestic authorities and other actors in affecting freedom of religion or belief. This is really important to a real reality check, and it hits home concerning the work that remains to be achieved in order to make freedom of religion or belief a lived reality for arguably most of the world's population. An appreciation of the perspective of the rights holder and the obstacles she faces in the enjoyment of this right can help us understand the obligations with which states are entrusted and that they need to meet in order to respond to their obligations on freedom of religion or belief and making it real. If the aim of human rights is not to make it a lived reality for the rights holder, then what is it for? Now, these obstacles to the enjoyment of freedom of religion or belief begin at birth, when, with the state's non-recognition of particular religious or belief groups, occasionally extending to outright denial of citizenship or other restrictions, but always representing a form of coercion and marginalization, which is felt in every interaction with the state. For example, accessing social services, getting birth papers, getting birth certificates, obtaining an education, having access to healthcare, and one could go on. Effective enjoyment or denial of freedom of religion or belief often depends on the actions or inactions of authorities closest to home. Local authorities such as municipalities or autonomous regions are particularly important. In some countries, these authorities are responsible for the imposition of religious laws or other laws which deeply violate freedom of religion or belief. For example, imposing or forbidding fasting, imposing or forbidding dress codes, and plural legal systems, which sometimes, in effect, do not allow for equal enjoyment of human rights by everyone. Even where the constitutional or legal order may in fact guarantee freedom of religion or belief, the reality of widespread prejudicial and discriminatory attitudes amongst functionaries at all levels of the state can essentially render freedom of religion or belief protections a dead letter. Indeed, we live in times where it is unfortunately often considered politically profitable to engage in the othering of outgroups, including religious or belief minorities, sometimes even majorities. At the local level, my mandate has received credible accusations of such behavior from local government functionaries across the world, who may even go so far as to incite, promote, and engage in direct violence against religious or belief minorities, their properties, homes, businesses, places of worship, schools, etc. Of course, this abdication of responsibility by state actors does not rest only at the local level. This violence often takes place in a context of impunity, as law enforcement officials and justice operators, including judges and lawyers, abdicate their allegiance to the rule of law in the service of their own safety, their own self-interest, their own prejudices. In the worst cases, the state itself is knowingly turning a blind eye to the structural discrimination etched into the systems of governance, or even the state itself is spearheading or considers that it is benefiting from violence against religious communities. At least, and regrettably, a short-term view considers the othering of particular religious communities as politically advantageous. It is important to also consider violations of freedom of religion or belief through other lenses in order to give us concrete understandings of the violations on the ground. For example, a gender justice lens shows us that legal norms and practices which apply to people identified with a given religion or belief may place women from that community at a significant disadvantage in relation to marriage, inheritance, custody of children, access to places of worship, and more. This can become even more entrenched through personal status law systems. Similarly, it is important to observe the situation of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, and the role of migration authorities in respecting freedom of religion or belief for everyone, as well as the principle of non-refoulement. Religious persecution can be a key indicator in motivating people of marginalized religious or targeted religious or beliefs to seek refuge outside of their home countries, given that accusations of apostasy and blasphemy, for example, can carry the death penalty, either from the state or as a result of mob violence, from which it is assured the police will not offer protection. My mandate has raised concerns about the threat of refoulement, whereby refugees or asylum seekers may be sent back to the countries they sought to escape, putting them at the risk of torture, other forms of ill treatment, or even death. In such a disheartening landscape, it is important to note positive examples as well. Some local authorities, such as in parts of Colombia, Denmark, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka, have established means of participatively engaging religious minorities in policy making, for example, in urban planning, helping the authorities to understand the needs of religious or belief communities on the ground and to try to plan accordingly. After all, minority rights standards insist that minorities should be included in all matters that concern them, and religious and belief minorities should be no exception to this. Minorities should also be enabled to contribute to public life and society at large. Many state and non-state actors, including civil society actors and faith-based organizations, create vital spaces for meaningful inter- and intra-faith dialogue, including with secular actors. And these spaces would be all the more effective if they pause to recognize groups who may have traditionally been excluded from them. For example, women, non-religious or secular groups, or communities who may be marginalized within their broader faith communities, and to take steps to be more inclusive in these dialogues, along with this fuller understanding of human rights. Finally, you may be aware of Human Rights Council Resolution 53.1, and it is important to draw attention to the urgent need of those with a platform to speak out against hatred and contempt for religious or belief minorities, their right to maintain their characteristics, a robust protection for them, as well as others, against discrimination, and the protection of all of their human rights without exception. Increased social conflict and polarization resulting from those who cash in on prejudice and hatred for short-term political gain. And effective policies are therefore needed for de-escalation, to demystify and address hatred and intolerance at root and indeed around the world. We need to ensure that the police are also acting appropriately, promptly, and without any discrimination to protect those who are targeted with hatred. One of my key recommendations for states is that alongside ongoing training and capacity building on freedom of religion or belief for state functionaries at all levels, that they establish a national freedom of religion or belief focal point with an independent mandate to promote freedom of religion or belief. These standards should categorically understand that the freedom to worship without fear includes all aspects of manifestation of freedom of religion or belief. There should be no hierarchy or selectivity between freedom of worship, observance, teaching, and practice for different communities. This should include the right to change religion or belief, to invite others to join one's religion or belief, to seek to persuade others, of course without coercion, and to carry out charitable activities, appoint and train representatives and leaders of the community, run educational establishments, and so on. Finally, given the scale of challenges faced in making freedom of religion or belief a lived reality, events such as this conference are of fundamental importance in reiterating the rallying call of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in creating spaces for reflection in which we can plug away at our own latent prejudices as well, because these too may be contributing to the marginalization of others in all spheres of our lives. And so we can gain more energy and determination to collectively confront the challenges that face the entire human family. I do hope that I will have the opportunity to continue to engage with you and even to meet with you, and I look forward to hearing more about the outcomes of today's event. I hope that the rest of the conference will be inspiring, and I have no doubt that it will. Thank you so much for this opportunity to join you, albeit digitally.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Nazila Ghania from the Faculty of Law, Oxford University, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief. Well, that was the first keynote that covered. You may notice in the program that we have 4 keynote addresses, and that covers each of the freedom in the UDHR. So the first one, she covered the assessing the landscape of freedom of religion and belief. Next, we move up to the freedom of expression with the keynote address number 2, the cost of defending freedom of expression. We have attorney 𝗓𝗄 Domingo. He's a graduate from the University of the Philippines, Indiana, and Harvard. And he's currently the president of the Philippines Bar Association. A well-known expert on IP, intellectual property rights, and copyrights, he has been teaching at different universities in the Philippines and beyond. Recently, he lent his experience and expertise to address the proliferation in the mass media of disinformation. As the convener of the movement against disinformation, Attorney Domingo now dedicates his efforts to addressing the spread of disinformation and false news in the internet and social media platform. And I should also add that he's prosecuting former Philippines President Duterte. So, so without further ado, may I invite Attorney 𝗓𝗄 on the stage, please.
Wow, that's a very good introduction. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't pronounce some of the names that have been previously introduced. I refer to, may I just call you your first name because the last names are quite formidable. No? Associate Professor Torino, Co-Chair Ms. Sayamol, Dr. Somkiat, Mr. Moritz, and of course my friend, new friend who introduced me as the prosecutor of the past president of the Republic of the Philippines. No? I'd like to extend to you the best wishes of the movement against disinformation. It is an aggregation or coalition of leading lawyers, academicians, fact checkers, social media practitioners, the media practitioners, both traditional and social platform practitioners, academicians, and I'm proud to say that just 2 days ago, our 2021 Nobel Prize winner, Maria Ressa, Nobel Prize winner, just joined our board of directors. But that's not the reason why I'm here right now upon invitation of the prestigious Chulalongkorn University, and thank you for the invitation as well. I'm supposed to talk about the cost of defending freedom of expression, something that is dear to my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. 75 years ago, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR, a foundational document that outlines the rights and freedoms that inhere in and are applicable to all human beings. Though not per se legally binding, the 30 articles in the UDHR provide a common standard of achievement for all peoples of nations, a set of guideposts to moral progress across diverse cultures and civilizations. From the original 58 UN members that adopted the UDHR and those adopting it in the succeeding years, the UDHR became the basis for international treaties and national constitutions. As a Filipino, it is my distinct national pride that notably among the 58 members that participated in the tedious process of producing, refining, and proposing an acceptable draft of the UDHR was the newly independent Republic of the Philippines, led by her quintessential diplomat. His name is Carlos P. Romulo, who later became the president of the 4th session of the United Nations Assembly in 1949. Mr. Romulo played a valuable role in the complex negotiations and debates that marked the drafting process. The diminutive Filipino statesman, he's about 4 and 11 inches tall, was a consistent advocate not only of human rights but also of decolonization. Then, a code word for national independence in the post-World War II years, which was high on the agenda of peoples like our people in the ASEAN countries, who were still then under the clutches of European colonialism. But before I proceed to the main crust of my talk this afternoon, let me just give you a quick review of the instruments that underpin freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a fundamental and universal human right. It unanimously recognized and therefore ratified by state parties to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or 𝗟𝗟. Freedom of expression remains to be a fundamental principle of every democratic government, and adversely, a right which governments can restrict within the realm of reasonableness. Freedom of expression embraces not only the expression of an opinion, but also the right not to speak. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. The right includes freedom to hold opinion without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers." Since the UDHR is a declaration, states have codified several rights, including freedom of expression, into a covenant known as the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, or ICCPR. Under the ICCPR, freedom of expression is protected pursuant to Article 19, which provides, and I quote, "Everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of his choice." The third one is the exercise of rights provided for in paragraph 2, the previous paragraph of this article, carries with it special duties and responsibilities, subject to certain restrictions. But these shall only be such as are provided by law or are necessary for respect of rights and reputations of others, and for the protection of national security or public order, or 𝗨𝗏𝗄𝗵𝗽, or public health or morals. Although ICCPR expressly enumerates several human rights entitled to universal respect, freedom of expression itself is not absolute. The same Article 19 explicitly states that it may be restricted to a certain degree, but only as may be provided by law, necessary, and/or pertaining to protection of national interest or security. In the regional setting, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, affirmed in its own commitment to human rights, including the right to freedom of expression through the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, or AHRD. The declaration states that every person has the right to freedom of expression, including freedom to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information, whether orally, in writing, or through any other medium, that person's choice. You will note that textually, upon textual analysis of Article 23 of the HHRD, demonstrates similarity with Article 19 of the UDHR, which provides, in turn, that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information, ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. But one important thing that we have to note in our ASEAN member countries, particularly the 10 member countries, there is an article, or there are Articles 7 and 8 of the AHRD, however, which provide limitations on the protection of rights, including that of free expression. Although the AHRD states that all human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated, the rest of Article 7 nonetheless pronounces that at the same time, and I quote, the realization of human rights must be considered in the regional and national context, bearing in mind different political, economic, legal, social, cultural, historical, and religious backgrounds, unquote. The foregoing provisions that I just read suggest the ASEAN way mentality, as one prestigious author said, and proves unresolved the difficult tension between the objective to promote universal human rights and the unwillingness of the member states to cede any of their sovereignty. Similarly, Article 8 does not identify a significant and essential principle in international human rights law, that particular human rights such as the right to freedom of expression are inviolable, sacrosanct, and non-derogable under any condition. Rather, the provision would tolerate state violations of human rights, including freedom of expression, so long as such violations serve, and I quote, national security, public order, public health, public safety, public morality, and the general welfare of the peoples. The HHRD limiting provisions on freedom of expression can be attributed to the ASEAN values, particularly the value of non-interference. This value represents the ASEAN way, quote unquote, which prevents ASEAN states from intruding into the affairs of fellow members to foster regional peace without form of accountability for rights violations. I think that's very important for us ASEAN countries to note. Closer to my home, the Philippines, our Article 3 of the Bill of Rights, Section 4 of the Philippine Constitution provides, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech or of expression or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. These provisions echo the First Amendment of the U.S. Federal Constitution, which says that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. These are the quintessential 14 words that provide the cornerstone for freedom of expression that had been actually adopted by many countries in the entire world, including the Philippines. As one erudite Filipino constitutionalist, our Dean Emeritus in the Ateneo Law School, our beloved Father Bernas, once said and once wrote, "There are several reasons why freedom of expression is guaranteed by the Constitution. For some, freedom of expression is essential for the search of truth. This is a marketplace idea which posits that the power of thoughts can be tested by its acceptability in the competition of the market. Another reason offered is that free expression is needed for democracy to work properly. The citizen's critic had to be given the information required for him to be able to perform his civil duty. Still, another reason is a very personal one. Freedom of expression promotes individual self-realization and self-determination." The global survey in the 2020 mentioned in the concept paper of this seminar concluded that, and I quote, "The United Nations has plenty of room for growth on the human rights agenda." And our director highlighted that there are some disappointments and some misgivings about how our ASEAN countries particularly are observing these human rights on freedom of expression particularly, and the previous speaker highlighted the other rights that we are going to address this afternoon. Despite numerous recommendations by states, for example, during the 2017 Universal Periodic Review, or UPR, regarding extrajudicial killings and other human rights violations, the killings, enforced disappearances, illegal or arbitrary arrests and detention, torture, threats, harassments, forcible evacuation, among other rights violations, have continued with bare impunity against families, communities, and human rights defenders in my country. These violations were committed in the course of the implementation of the, you guess it, Duterte administration, drug war, counter-insurgency program and policies that determine human rights and legitimate expressions of freedoms and political dissent, despite repeated calls for independent and credible investigations that should lead to holding the perpetrator of said violations genuinely accountable. Many human rights organizations in my country note that despite existing international and domestic human rights framework adopted by the Philippine government, there is a glaring lack of effective domestic redress mechanisms that can render substantive justice for victims of human rights violations. Such environment has bred an increasingly dangerous climate of impunity in the country. Even the preliminary examinations, investigations of the International Criminal Court has been met with the Philippine government's denial of its jurisdiction, despite the ratification of the Rome Statute in November 2011. And of course, to be fair and to give a balanced report, the Philippine government under the present president is reevaluating its position concerning the ICC. On January 1, 2008, for example, the National Union of Journalists, or NUJ, paid tribute to 171 journalists killed in 2007. The International Federation of Journalists noted that Iraq was number one with 65 deaths. In the Philippines, we had at that time 6 journalists killed and 54 journalists were murdered under the administration of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. And in 2006, 𝗙𝑠I or INSI stated that the Philippines was the second most dangerous country for journalists next to Iraq, listing 15 work-related journalists murdered. And I understand last night from our dear moderator here that we are now #1 in ranking as the #1 perpetrator of human rights on this. These series of killings are shocking and reveal the extreme dangers that journalists and those in media face every day in trying to carry out their work. One very probably peculiarly Filipino in nature is the fact that red tagging, which I will define later on, preceded extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances in the Philippines. The term red tagging is commonly defined as the harassment or prosecution of a person because of known or suspected communist sympathies. Our Commission on Human Rights follows this definition laid down by the International Peace Observers Network, or IPON, which it as an act of state actors, particularly law enforcement agencies, to publicly brand individuals, groups as institutions as affiliated to communists or leftist terrorists. The term has been defined in Philippine jurisprudence through the dissenting opinion of our Supreme Court Associate Justice Marvick Leonen in its 2015 court case, Zarate versus Aquino. The decision says, red tagging is the act of labeling, branding, naming, and accusing individuals or organizations of being left-leaning, subversives, communists, or terrorists as a strategy by state agents, particularly law enforcement agencies, and the military against those perceived to be threats or enemies of the state. Perhaps it is an understatement if I say that red tagging impinges on the right to freedom or to free expression and dissent. The CHR, or the Commission on Human Rights, also noted that red tagging threatens the lives or safety of individuals. The act of red tagging human rights defenders constitutes a grave threat to their lives, liberty, and security. It creates a distortion to the nature of their work and makes them susceptible to attacks and a number of violations as emphasized by the Commission on Human Rights. It is therefore in this context that MAD, my organization, calls for an independent and credible investigation that should lead to holding the perpetrators of said violations genuinely accountable. Extrajudicial killings of journalists is probably becoming to be a commonplace in my country. There are a lot of journalists that have been murdered because they have been most critical in the past administration, and there is no telling that it will continue in the present administration. And therefore, what is the MAD doing about this? I have a long list of cases that we had initiated and handled in defense of freedom of expression and the press. We hailed to court public officials for the red tagging of our clients, particularly during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. They were red tagged as being communists, but they're actually helping the people assuage or try to address the COVID-19 pandemic. I will not tell you or give you the litany of cases that we're handling. And one foremost red tagging case that we're handling would be on behalf of a judge who had been vilified by a public official as an imbecile, as a communist cuddler, and criticized the decision of the judge openly and threatened to burn the houses of all the judges in the Philippines because of what that particular judge did. What did the judge do? Just render a decision saying that she could not rule that the CPP, the Communist Party of the Philippines, NDF, is not a terrorist organization. That was her verdict. And the people who was against that, particularly the red taggers, who were the public officials at the time, said that she is a cuddler of communism. That's the kind of thing that we're facing right now. We are aware that criminal prosecutions are stressful and finally draining challenges. They are time-consuming, and for those without ready access to competent legal counsel, can become debilitating experiences. Any cases filed against or on behalf of journalists leave little doubt that this slew of suits will introduce a chilling effect on their exercise of press freedom. We mad lawyers believe in the importance of the freedom of the press, and we cannot stand idle and let this happen. For example, we represented Maria Ressa in a cyber libel crime or offense that she allegedly committed. We also joined the legal defense of Senator Laila de Lima, who was incarcerated for 7 years, for almost 7 years, without the benefit of bail. And isn't that a human rights violation? On trumped-up charges. Okay. Fortunately, recently, she was allowed to post bail. But after 6 years and almost 7 years and 128 days of incarceration for fabricated charges, we also held one public official in indirect contempt and went to the Supreme Court directly to question her red taggings on television, red tagging on the daily newspapers, and the consistent pattern of vilifying those who are in dissent of the government's position. And this is what we are experiencing. And I understand from my reading of the international press, this is not only something that the Philippines is experiencing. And that's not within the province of my talk. So I believe that we should have a coalition against this kind of human rights violations. And this particular series and this particular forum would perhaps be the spark for all of us to unite and be together across the borders so that we can somehow make it a more definitive position against the human rights violations. Of course, if the international organizations are not able to do that, I believe that the private civil organizations perhaps can unite and let their voices be heard in this particular case. A free press kept the light of freedom lit even during the darkest days of our martial law, the martial law that was imposed by the father of our current president, who says that this is actually a unity administration. I believe it is not a unity administration. It is a continuity of the previous martial law imposed by his dictator father. And the media, the journalists, the people who would be exercising the freedom of expression and of the press, let the freedom, even during those darkest days. They have fought for the public's right to know on countless occasions, and the rule of law should prevail, upon which every lawyer pays fealty to. And the rule of law is kept strong by the light that a press or free press illumines. When the fourth estate is under siege, those of us, particularly the movement against disinformation and other allied members of our coalition, believe in these freedoms, must offer what we can to assist them and to aid them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Attorney Rico, for a very valuable insights on the cause of defending freedom of expression. Next, we move up to the third freedom, freedom from want, and we have Dr. 𝗂𝗘𝗿𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗏, the president of the Thailand Development Research Institute, TDRI, to give a keynote speech. Dr. 𝗂𝗘𝗿𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗏 obtained his PhD in computer science from Tokyo University of Technology. He has been recognized as a leading Thai expert in the area of trade and investment policies, innovation policies, education policies, and ICT policies. His research areas focus on economic analysis of law, trade policy, IP, ICT, and media policy. He is currently the president of the TDRI. So, Dr. 𝗂𝗘𝗿𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗏, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join this very important session. I will talk about three things. First one is about poverty, second one populism, and then the main idea is the freedom from want. I think a country like Thailand and most middle-income countries have been successfully reducing poverty. So poverty is no such a big deal any longer. And it shouldn't be a big deal, but it still is. Even though Thailand has decreased the level of poverty from 20% of the population some 15 years ago to only 6% of the population now under poverty line. We still have very large, very big gaps in terms of income inequality. And this is not the only problem of Thailand, but also from other developing countries, the Philippines, Indonesia, as you can see from the chart. Countries in this region has been always experiencing very high income inequality, measured by the so-called Gini coefficient. The higher, the more unequal. If you look at Sweden, it is only 29, but for the Philippines, it's 41%, 41, Indonesia, 38, and Thailand, 35. So income inequality has become a very important problem to solve. And in terms of inequality, if we look at the very top end, it can be very extreme. The previous speaker, Attorney Domingo, has talked about the Philippines has been the most dangerous place for journalists. Thailand is not that dangerous in that regard, but we are among the top. We are the gold medalists in terms of income inequality, if you look at including the top as well. The richest 1% of the Thai population have 67% of all the assets in the country. So this is a very highly unequal society. We have around 40,000 people with more than $1 million of assets, and there are 70% people in Thailand who have over $500 million. So Thailand and other developing countries, after addressing poverty problem, they have to also address inequality problem. And there are many causes of income and wealth inequality. First of all, there are monopoly in the economy. Merger acquisition is becoming a very big problem in Thailand, and consumer rights have not been adequately protected. Corruption is rampant, and corruption is always regressive in the sense that the rich and the powerful are the ones who steal from the poor people and the general public. Infrastructure development, even though well-intentioned, can sometimes be a source of income inequality because of the distribution, always concentrated in more prosperous area. Like Bangkok, we have over, or very soon have 20 rail lines. But in the even city like Chiang Mai or Songkhla in Thailand, big city enough to have its own public transportation, we don't have that kind of infrastructure yet. Fiscal policy is another issue. How the government collect tax and spend will greatly affect income inequality, and I'll talk about that a bit later. Access to finance for the poor is another issue, very important, and made popular by the movement of the microcredit. Social safety net is another issue that is very important to protect people when they are in financial distress, health distress. Also, quality of education is becoming a very big problem because once the country develops, wage income will be a very important part, and wage will be determined by the quality of the skill. And lastly, labor policy is also very important. And this is another issue that Thailand needs to address very urgently. The income of the worker are determined by minimum wage, and minimum wage has increased very, very slowly in Thailand. So there are many causes of income inequality, and many of the issues have to be addressed very soon. Now I turn the issue to populism. There are so many definitions of populism, so I would like to divide populism into three species. One is political populism. Second one is economic populism, and the third one is cultural populism. All these populism have something in common in the sense that the populist leader will divide the society into us against them. And the leader claims to be the one who represents the voice of the people in every version of the populism. In political populism, there are some signature usually promoted by the leader that there are some conspiracy theory against the current leader, the one who get elected from the people, but are toppled by the forces, undemocratic forces. Economic populism, which will be the main idea of my talk, will be related to irresponsible fiscal policy, how the government spend usually defines economic populism. And lastly, cultural populism is now widespread in the West, in the US, in the European Union. This is mostly related to racial issue, anti-immigration issue, things like that. This is just the example. In Thailand, we have already become a land of economic populism. If you look at the news before the election, almost every political party promised to give economic handouts to the people. Even though the electoral law mandates that political parties have to declare where are they going to fund their projects, this is not, has been adequately monitored and enforced. So there are a lot of irresponsible political policy, economic policy. And after become the government, the 𝗬𝗘𝗏-led coalition government have announced to distribute 10,000 baht to every citizen, every adult citizen. 10,000 baht is something like $300 to everyone in the names of economic stimulation. This is a kind of economic populism, I believe. And the idea of a policy become a populist policy is that it's not physically responsible. And people have to realize that there is no such thing as free lunch or free money. For example, if the government would like to fund the 10,000 baht cash handout, which will constitute, I think, around 16 to 17 billion US dollar or 3% of our GDP, a very huge amount of money. If they are going to finance that by taxation, that will affect the current generation. We are going to be taxed. There is no such thing as free lunch. And if the government is going to use the money from the budget, other things are going to be crowded out. If we are supporting schools or patients in hospitals, those money will be taken away from those are benefiting right now. So that's not the populist leaders are going to do. Certainly they are not going to anger the current generation. What are they going to do is to take from the future generation, like the little girl here who voice all the time. I'm sure she will be very active in the future if the government is going to tax her once the fiscal burden have to be monetized. So the government is going to borrow to get loan to finance the project, and the burden will be on the next generation. And it is also contemplating of using off-budget money. Off-budget means using something like contingency liability from state-owned enterprises, state banks. But fortunately, this is prohibited by the law, so it is very difficult now in Thailand. Another idea usually floated by the government is using new money. Just print money out of thin air, and that will create inflation. And inflation will become indirect tax on the people, because if you have the current level nominal income, the price of good, as the price of good increases, you have less and less ability to pay. So it's a kind of indirect taxation. So there is no such thing as free lunch. We have to beware of economic populism. And to compare giving away 10,000 baht of money with something that is widely considered to be really beneficial, I would like to give an example of early child welfare. In Thailand, we are now granting 600 baht per month to newborn child as allowance, as support for their family. And the research by our institute and the UNICEF a few years ago have demonstrated that by having this kind of welfare, the newborn children have better nutrients and they grow bigger, physically stronger. And they can be taken to have more frequent visits to doctor, get more vaccination, which means better health in the future as well. Mothers are becoming healthier and can, give more breastfeeding to the newborn child. And financially, women become more empowered by, getting the money from the newborn child as a cash allowance. So this is really beneficial in terms of investment in human capital as well as in terms of social return to the population. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. Our institute have estimated that by giving newborn child allowance of 3,400 baht per month, which is the standard, I think according to the UDHR Article 25 of the adequate standard of living. For children, it is estimated to be around $100 per month for each child now. And if you would like to make that universal, increase the number from $20 to $100 per month per child, it doesn't require a lot of money. It requires only 0.7% of our GDP, or around 130 billion baht per year, 1/5 of the cash transfer promoted by the government. So it's affordable and it's really targeted to the needy group. And I think if we would like to increase welfare, there will be one very important issue to be discussed, whether that welfare should be universal or should be targeted. And this is a kind of perennial issue discussed in Thailand. And I would like to share some of my thoughts on the topic. According to the economic principle, social welfare can be either targeted or universal. And I think we can use a thinking of whether that welfare is directed for poverty reduction or risk reduction. Poverty reduction is you target the one who are poor and you give them assistance, social assistance, to make them above the poverty line. And by definition, the poverty reduction will be targeted to the poor, which means it will be a targeted welfare. And this is currently implemented by the Thai social welfare card, the one who are registered with the government, declaring themselves as a poor, can get a social welfare card. And there are around 14 million of them at the moment. The second kind of social welfare is related to reducing risk. By risk, I mean everything we face in our life, like when we feel sick, when we die younger than we supposed to, or when we are out of job, unemployed. This is totally compatible with the idea of the Article 75 of the UDHR. This one should be universal, I think. It should be made into rights. And sometimes people who get benefits have to contribute something, as in the case of social insurance. We have to chip in worker, the government, and the employer as well. In the case of Thailand, workers are now chipping in around 5%, the employer another 5%. It is the government that is not doing its own obligation. Rather than chipping in 5%, it's chipping only 2.5%. So this will make the social insurance, especially the pension fund, very vulnerable to future shock. There are pros and cons of having welfare to be universal or targeted. Certainly, the universal scheme will be very easy to implement. Everyone gets funded, everyone gets assistance. So there would be very low missing people, which is a good thing. But it would be very, very costly if everything is done as universal welfare. So welfare, universal welfare should be reserved for something that is really, really important. To the level it becomes rights rather than, entitlement, things like that. Targeted welfare, on the other hand, is less costly but are really difficult to deploy, and it requires really high capability of the state. In the case of Thailand, for example, the state welfare cards are supposed to be targeted to the poor, and people self-declare to register. Even that, 51% of the poor are missing out because they are too poor to show up. They don't have transportation means to go to register at the government office, things like that. So the poorest, the handicapped one, are the one who left out. And this is really a very miserable situation. So I think the best way to implement it is to use a mixed system that can maximize the benefits. Such a mixed system is something like this. In the case of child allowance, we are now giving 600 baht or $20 per month to each child. So 600 baht should be universal welfare child support. But for the poor, there should be additional money, something like 3,000 baht, around $100 per child per month. And there are two ways to implement this. The first one is to filter the poor in, just target the poor. But the case of the welfare card shows that it is very difficult to find the poor, and the poor will not self-declare successfully because of a lot of cost incurred to them. So a better way that our institute proposed is to filter the non-poor out. Basically, we give it to everyone at the first place as a starting point. And by using a lot of data, today we are having a lot of big data. So the government should use that kind of big data to screen out people who are non-poor. For example, using house registration, land registration, property registration to filter out homeowners, car owners, and also the high incomers who are having bank deposits high enough to a certain level to filter that out. And there will be some people who are still non-poor and will get the welfare. But that's okay, comparing with the existing scheme. And as the government the government strengthen its capability to collect more information, more precise, more accurate information, the system can improve better. So in this limited time, I would like to conclude with 3 messages, summarizing what I have talked about. Firstly, I think Thailand and many developing countries are no longer poor as the economy developed. The poor will be fewer and fewer. But the society, if not managed properly, can be experiencing higher income and asset inequality. So the focus should gradually shifting with time from attacking poverty to attacking inequality. Secondly, with high inequality, there's a need for supporting the poor, and there will be opportunity for the populist to come out and say that we stand for the poor, and our policy will reduce income inequality, as current government in Thailand and many other governments in the region are claiming. Please don't believe that. And then lastly, state firmly to the government that what we need is well-designed welfare system, and only well-defined welfare system can solve the problem. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Somkiat, for very detailed information on the current situation. Next, I would like to invite Dr. 𝗂𝗵𝗂𝗏𝗧𝗏, who will kindly introduce our 4th keynote speaker.
Thank you, 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I'm going to introduce our last but not least speaker of this morning in Thai. So those who will need translation, please make sure that you have a translation equipment with you, please. There'll be simultaneous translation. Mino Pinapa Priksapan or Mino เป็นพันยาของบิลลี่หรือพอลจีรักจงเจริญแกนนำกะเหรี่ยงบ้านบางกลอยอำเภอแก่งกระจานจังหวัดเพชรบุรี Should I continue or should I wait? Okay, so please get your translation equipment. Sorry for this inconvenience. Okay, I'll be waiting for a few seconds to continue the introduction of our 4th keynote speaker. I hope he will not be running around his mother. He seemed to enjoy this room. Okay, so I restart. The 4th keynote speaker is คุณพิณภาพฤกษาพันธ์หรือมินอนะคะเป็นภรรยาของบิลลี่หรือพอลจีรักจงเจริญที่เป็นแกนนำกะเหรี่ยงบ้านบางกลอยอำเภอแก่งกระจานจังหวัดเพชรบุรีบิลลี่หายตัวไปอย่างไร้ร่องรอยเมื่อเดือนเมษายน 2557 in 2014 บิลลี่เป็นนักปกป้องสิทธิมนุษยชนโดยเฉพาะสิทธิด้านสิ่งแวดล้อมและก็สิทธิชุมชนกะเหรี่ยงนะคะหลังจากการหายตัวไปของบิลลี่มินอหรือพินภาพฤกษาพันธ์ก็ร่วมกับเครือข่ายองค์กรด้านสิทธิมนุษยชนเรียกร้องให้มีการไต่สวนหาข้อเท็จจริงเกี่ยวกับการหายตัวไปของบิลลี่เพื่อทำความจริงให้ปรากฏนะคะโดยที่โดยภาครัฐI lost my concentration now ก็คือปัจจุบันมินอและลูกๆอีก5 คนหรือ6 คนนะคะก็รอความยุติธรรมอยู่ยังมีความหวังมินอต้องเผชิญกับสภาวะที่อยู่กับความไร้ความมั่นคง insecurity แล้วก็รู้สึกถึงความไม่มั่นคงในชีวิตเมื่อต้องเลี้ยงลูก 5-6 คนอย่างที่แจ้งไปแล้วนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นสิ่งที่มินอเผชิญอยู่ก็คือการอยู่กับความกลัวตลอดเวลาความกลัวนั้นนอกจากความกลัวจากการหายตัวไปหรือการบังคับสูญหายของสามีแล้วก็ยังถูกบังคับย้ายถิ่นที่นะครับบางกลอยใจแผ่นดินก็มินอจะพูดเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะก็จะเป็น live experience ที่มินอthat Minor will be sharing with us. Minor, please.
ค่ะขอสวัสดีทุกคนในห้องนี้ค่ะขอบคุณอาจารย์ที่ได้มีโอกาสมาในงานนี้ค่ะก็มีหัวข้อเกี่ยวกับความกลัวคือขอเล่าถึงเรื่องปัญหาในหมู่บ้านบางกลอยที่พี่น้องและหนูอยู่อะค่ะก็คือเกี่ยวกับสิทธิในที่ดีทำกินนะคะก็ตั้งแต่สามีหนูคือบิลลี่เขาเรียกร้องสิทธิในที่ดีทำกินแล้วก็เป็นเรื่องเราที่แบบเหมือนหน่วยงานที่เกี่ยวข้องหน่วยงานอุทยานนะคะเขาเห็นแล้วแบบไม่เห็นด้วยกับคนที่อาศัยอยู่ในป่าค่ะเขาเห็นพวกหนูที่อาศัยอยู่ในป่าว่าเป็นผู้ที่ทำลายป่าแต่ในตรงกันข้ามน่ะพวกหนูอยู่ในป่าแล้วก็ดูแลป่าก็ปลูกขอี้อายุ100 ปีอะค่ะป่าก็ยังดียังอุดมสมบูรณ์อะค่ะแล้วก็พอจัดมี หลังจากนั้นมีการไปเผาบ้านปู่ขออี้และยุ้งฉานเข้าขอพี่น้องบางกลอยแล้วก็มีสามีหนูคือบิลลี่ไปออกมาเรียกร้องสิทธิ์ก็ถูกกระทำให้หายตัวไปเมื่อวันที่17 เมษายน 2557อะค่ะจนทุกวันนี้หนูก็ออกมาเรียกร้องสิทธิ์เหมือนหนูมาเรียกร้องสิทธิ์ที่ควรจะได้รับอะค่ะแต่ว่าในเรื่องของคดีบิลลี่อะค่ะศาลที่ผ่านมาศาลก็พิพาทให้ผู้ที่อยู่กับบิลลี่เป็นคนสุดท้ายอ่ะเขาก็ให้มีความผิดแค่ข้อหาเดียวที่ว่าจับบิลลี่แล้วไม่ส่งดำเนินคดีที่ตำรวจอะค่ะก็เลยมีศาลให้จำคุก3 ปีแต่ว่าได้รับประกันตัวออกมาแล้วก็จะทีทนายก็จะช่วยหนูจะไปยื่นอุทธรณ์ศาลอุทธรณ์ต่อค่ะก็กำลังรวบรวมข้อมูลก็ยังไม่ได้ไปยื่นอุทธรณ์นะคะหนูก็เลยอยู่ทุกวันนี้ก็รู้สึกแบบหนูถ้าอยู่ในป่าก็รู้สึก ไม่มีความปลอดภัยจะเท่าไหร่ มีความกลัวเกี่ยวกับการทำมาหากินการทำที่ดินทำกินในป่าในเขตอุทยานนะคะก็รวมถึงพี่น้องญาติพี่น้องของหนูทุกคนที่อยู่ในหมู่บ้านบางกลอยเนี่ยบางคนเขาก็ยังมีความเดือดร้อนบางครอบครัวแม้กระทั่งที่เป็นญาติกันหนวกเขาก็มีความเดือดร้อนในที่ดีทำกินอ่ะเวลาเขาขึ้นไปที่ด้านเดินเขาก็ถูกดำเนินคดีอีกหลายคนประมาณ20 กว่าคนอะค่ะจนมีปัญหาหลายๆปัญหาที่ติดตามมาก็คือเรื่องในการไม่สบายเวลาออกมาหาหมอเขาก็จะมองแบบถูกเลือกปฏิบัติว่าคือชาวบ้านเนี่ยคือชาวบ้านบางกลอยมาหาหมออีกแล้วอะไรประมาณเนี้ยก็ที่ปีนี้ที่ผ่านมามีญาติที่เป็นลูกพี่ลูกน้องกันหนวกมาหาหมอเป็นไข้เลือดออกคนหนึ่งแล้วพอเขามาแบบหมอก็ไม่รับในตอนนั้นเขาก็อ้างว่าหมดเวลาเจาะเลือดแล้วก็ให้กลับบ้านไปก็พอเช้าวันหนึ่งก็มาอีกรอบหนึ่งพอมาพี่สาวหนูก็อาการแบบแย่แล้วอะก็พอหมอสวนใส่ที่ช่วยว่าหายใจอะค่ะเขาก็เลยเสียชีวิตไปอะค่ะก็เลยหมอช่วยไม่ทันละก็เสียชีวิตไปอะค่ะก็มันเป็นความกลัวอย่างหนึ่งที่เหมือนแบบเราได้รับสิทธิไม่เท่าเทียมกันนะคะแล้วก็ที่ผ่านมาคือมีแม้กระทั่งบางสื่อเรียกหนูให้ไปสัมภาษณ์แต่พอหนูสัมภาษณ์เขาที่หลานนกเขาก็จะแบบคนที่ฝ่ายตรงข้ามหนูเขาก็จะเอาหลักฐานคนที่จับบิลลี่ที่อยู่กับบิลลี่คนสุดท้ายอะค่ะเขาก็เอาหลักฐานของหนูไปยืนยันเกี่ยวกับทนายเขาก็ไปแจ้งความทนายหนูที่ทำคดีปู่ขออีอะค่ะคดีเผาบ้านเขาไปแจ้งความแบบว่าทนายหนูไปทำเรื่องให้ปู่มันเป็นไม่ใช่ข้อเท็จจริงนะคะมาเป็นตรงกันข้ามอีกแบบเขาก็เอารูปภาพหนูไปยืนยันแล้วก็เอาไปส่งให้ตำรวจก็เรียกหนูไปให้หนูไปชี้แจงว่าวันนั้นหนูไปคุยอะไรกับสื่อนั้นหนูก็เลยแบบก็หนูจำได้ว่าเขาในขนาดนั้นเขาก็ถามถึงวิถีชีวิตการทำไร่หมูเวียนการเผาไร่อะค่ะว่าตรงกับวันเดือนอะไรวันที่เท่าไหร่ประมาณนั้นหนูก็เลยไปพูดในวันนั้นแต่ไม่รู้ว่าสื่อนั้นเอาภาพนะไปลงแล้วก็คนที่ออกมาต่อสู้เรียบร้องสิทธิเขาก็เอาหลักฐานนั้นมาเป็นพยานหนูก็เลยรู้สึกแบบคือที่ทนายหนูถูกแจ้งความคืนแล้วก็มีญาติที่ชื่อนอจอบเป็นเขาก็ถูกแจ้งความฝ่ายตรงข้ามถูกแจ้งความเขากลับมาเหมือนกันหนูก็เลยรู้สึกแบบว่าที่อยู่ในฐานะทุกวันนี้เหมือนแบบอยู่แล้วไม่มีความปลอดภัยอะค่ะเขาก็จะมองเห็นว่าหนูเป็นพวก AGO หัวลงแรงพวกนั้นก็เลยบางครั้งก็เจอ เจอชาวบ้านที่อยู่ในพื้นที่หมู่บ้านเดียวกันก็เขาก็ชี้หน้าว่าหนูออกมาเรียบร้องสิทธิ์เพื่อสามีตัวเองแล้ววันหน้าเดี๋ยวจะหายเหมือนสามีตัวเองก็ประมาณนั้นก็ ก็รู้สึกกลัวไปหมดเวลาออกมาข้างนอกเข้ามาในกรุงเทพก็เดินทางมาก็จะมาเจอแท็กซี่หนูไปที่สถานที่ที่ไปอ่ะเขาแบบหนูไม่รู้จักสถานที่ก็เลยจะเปิดดู GPS เขาก็หาว่าหนูเป็นอะไรนะดูถูกเขาอะไรประมาณนั้นก็เขาบอกว่าถ้าไม่เชื่อใจแท็กซี่ก็วันหลังก็ไม่ต้องมาขึ้นแท็กซี่หนูก็เลยบอกว่าไม่ใช่อย่างนั้นนะพี่หนูไม่ได้ดูถูกนะหนูแค่อยากรู้ว่าระหว่างทางที่ไปเนี่ยมีอะไรผ่านบ้างมีสถานที่สังขารตรงไหนบ้างหนูก็แค่อยากเรียนรู้ไปเรื่อยๆเพราะคนขับแท็กซี่ก็จะบ่นไปตลอดทางไปถึงหน้าโรงแรมนะคะหนูก็เลยรู้สึกแบบเกิดมาเป็นมนุษย์คือความปลอดภัยไม่ค่อยมีเลยอะค่ะมีแต่สิ่งที่มันเหยียบหยามมาเรื่อยๆอะค่ะก็ความไม่มั่นคงในชีวิตนี่คือเกี่ยวกับเรื่องที่ดีทำกินนะคะคือถ้าเราไม่มีที่ดีทำกินเราไม่มีที่อยู่อาศัยก็ในความรู้สึกหนูคือเราอยู่แบบต้องหาเช้ากินต้องหาเช้ากินเช้าต้องหาเย็นกินเย็นนะคะก็แบบอยู่แบบไม่มั่งคงอะค่ะถ้าเรามีที่ดีทำกินไปขอเราเองเราก็สามารถทำกินปลูกข้าวปลูกพืชผักทุกอย่างอยู่ในไร่ได้เราก็สามารถอยู่แบบดำรงชีวิตอยู่แบบมั่งคงได้อะค่ะแต่ทุกวันนี้พี่น้องที่อยู่ในหมู่บ้านบางกลอยบางคนก็เดือดร้อนบางครอบครัวก็ไม่มีที่ทำกินเขาก็ไม่มีข้าวกินนะคะเขาก็ต้องออกมารับจ้างข้างนอกจนบางคนก็มีปัญหาเกี่ยวกับเรื่องสิทธิในบัตรประชาชนก็มันไม่ได้เขาก็ออกมารับจ้างข้างนอกก็มีปัญหาเกี่ยวกับการตรวจสถานะบุคคลนี้อีกอะค่ะก็คือไม่มั่นคงในด้านนี้ก็แล้วก็กลัวอีกแบบหนึ่งคือคดีบิลลี่อะค่ะคือคิดว่ายังไม่รู้ว่าถ้าตอนจบสุดท้ายหนูจะได้รับความยุติธรรมหรือเปล่าหรือว่าจะจบไปแบบงั้นก็หนูก็ยังกลัวอยู่ว่าจะใช้ชีวิตจะอยู่ยังไงก็สถานะณปัจจุบันนี่ก็อย่าอยู่แบบเงียบๆก็อย่ารู้สึกกลัวแบบไปไหนมาไหนไปเข้าไร่เข้าสวนก็ยังมีความกลัวอยู่ตลอดเวลาค่ะก็รู้สึกไม่เป็นหัวทุกคนที่เข้ามาช่วยเกี่ยวกับคดีบิลลี่เกี่ยวกับคดีที่พี่น้องในบางกลอยอะค่ะก็รู้สึกว่าคนที่หนูรู้จักนี่บางคนก็ป่วยเป็นโรคเสียชีวิตไปบ้านบางคนก็ถูกแจ้งความคือบ้านอะไรประมาณนั้นก็หนูก็รู้สึกทั้งกลัวทั้งเป็นห่วงทุกคนที่เข้ามาเกี่ยวข้องกับชีวิตของหนูที่เกี่ยวข้องกับคดีบิลลี่เกี่ยวข้องกับพี่น้องที่หมู่บ้านบางกลอยที่เข้ามาช่วยเหลือทุกคนเลยอะค่ะก็คือถ้าเป็นไปได้ก็อย่าฝากถึงผู้มีอำนาจหรือผู้หลักผู้ใหญ่ที่สูงสุดให้ ให้แบบดูแลคนที่อยู่ในป่าในเขาให้มีสิทธิเท่าเทียมกันให้แบบดูเราอยู่ในป่าแล้วก็เราเป็นคนกะเหรี่ยงปากะยอเราก็คือคนนะคะเราก็อยู่มีจิตใจเหมือนกันทุกคนนะคะก็อยากให้คนหน่วยงานที่เกี่ยวข้องมองเห็นคนทุกคนเท่าเทียมกันไม่อยากให้เลือกปฏิบัติกับทุกคนนะคะก็ฝากแค่นี้ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
ก็ขอเป็นกำลังใจให้มินอแล้วก็ลูกๆนะคะ One of the reasons why I proposed to the law school to invite Minor to come and share with us her lived experience because her case is not really unique, in the case of Thailand. There are many other peoples, especially those ethnic minorities, living with discrimination and, of course, the cases of enforced disappearance have been increasing in Thailand. So the case of Billy, as I said, is only one of them. And he left behind his whole family. And I think we all play the roles in actually pushing for justice for Billy and Minor and her family. ขอบคุณมากครับมินอที่มา I have to thank the National Human Rights Commission for actually taking care of Minor to come here by providing her with transportation. And this is to ensure that her security is properly protected and she will be sent back to her community by the National Human Rights Commission transportation. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. That concludes the keynote address part. We have a break session. Since we are running late, may I invite you back in like 11:30 for the panel session 1. The break is outside and on your left, and also the restrooms are also on your left as well. So see you in about roughly 10 minutes. Freedom from Want and Freedom from Fear with Dr. 𝗟𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 from the Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University as the moderator. So at this time, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. 𝗟𝗃𝗏𝗏.
Thank you, Ajahn Phawat. As already mentioned by Dr. Phawat, that I'm sitting here as member of Faculty of Law, Chulalongkorn University, no longer as a co-chair of the working group on ASEAN Human Rights Mechanism. And I'm serving as moderator for this session, looking at freedom from want and freedom from fear. We actually heard, especially from Minor and Dr. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 about how freedom from want and freedom from fear, especially in terms of condition and situation, currently playing not only in Thailand but also in the region. We are having on this particular panel 4 speakers, but one will be joining us online from Chiang Mai. Unfortunately, the person in the list, Professor Mahitashan Konsala, she has an urgent meeting from Faculty of Law Ateneo de Manila, so she could not join us even online. But fortunately, we'll be getting someone who is, I think, maybe one of the most qualified to talk about freedom from want and freedom from fear, and she's from Myanmar. I will be first inviting the first speaker on the list, Sumita Chantini Kitchener. Sumita has been a long-time friend of mine. We have been working together for quite some years. She's the founder of an organization which is called 𝗟RH𝗱𝗏. And I think the name of this organization has its own meaning and is very meaningful in itself. Sumita, you'll be having about, let's say, like 12 minutes to share with us about how you perceive freedom from want and freedom from fear, and what are the conditions of the two freedoms, especially in Southeast Asia, including the challenges. I am not asking you to find solutions because I think it would be a bit too ambitious for us to find a solution within 1 hour or so. So please, Sumita.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this session, and I'm happy to be in the panel with these eminent speakers. I think for me, freedom of want and freedom from fear is very, very simply put. Freedom from want is where people don't have to worry about their basic needs, where they don't have to worry about their meals, their shelter, and also in terms of for their families, or where they're going to have their next meal, things like that. And taking away that freedom means that you are denying people of that basic rights, basic needs, yeah? And freedom from fear, this is interesting because we seem to, although there is many instances where marginalized group face harassment or violation, but freedom of fear, in this context, we would look at freedom of where people can live with dignity and without fear from governments and authorities. Because I work with a lot of the migrant and refugee groups, so this is the way I perceive freedom of want and freedom of fear, from fear. So if you look at the countries in our region, Asia region, we see the denial of these freedoms more evidently in marginalized groups. When I say marginalized groups, that means non-citizens, populations, migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, stateless people, and even foreign spouses in certain countries. So, and the interesting part of all this is if you see the UDHR's first article, which states that all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights. For me, this is just not an article. It is a statement that was made in reference to the World War II at that time, and the aftermath where slavery was very rampant in 1940s and 50s and so on, and where governments were depriving and denying fellow human beings of the same rights that they were enjoying. Okay, and this came about from the notion that it was us against them. Right? They have that kind of notion, us against them, and that they did not deserve the same right. So that is how the leaders that came about discussing on the UDHR's articles. But the sad part is, fast forward to the present time, we are still dealing with slavery, we are still dealing with forced labor, trafficking. This is like 75 years after the UDHR, and we're still having to enact laws and policies to deal with slavery, forced labor, trafficking. Yeah? And we also see governments, they don't have any qualms of pushing back on asylum seekers or pushing back on refugees who come to the shores. Governments deem it fit to detain vulnerable populations under immigration laws in the non-citizen population. On the other hand, we are still, on the other hand, when we deny all these rights, but at the same time, these are the same government that sits around tables with stakeholders and try to enact laws and policies to deal with detention and to deal with the vulnerable population. Sometimes I feel there's a lot of hypocrisy when we go to government meetings because we try to advocate for their rights, but these are the same people who are denying the rights of the population that we seek to help. Yeah? So, and for me, the issue is also the fact that many people, including the civil society, do not realize that the migration system that we have currently, and that has been there for almost 30 years, is exploitative in nature. Before people could migrate, could go to a country and for work and for employment, they could have rights of the employment benefits, they can have a right to family, they have even right to citizenship. But the current migration system we have does not give that kind of benefit to any migrant worker that comes into our territories. And this is why we always keep telling everyone that no matter how much we try to advocate change in the current migration system that we have, things cannot change because the very nature of that migration system is exploitation. Yeah? So, and and you can see that employment benefits, social security, right to family, right to citizens, these are again, denied to migrant worker populations and also asylum seekers and refugees. Again, they reconceptualize that notion again, us against them. Okay, they need some other, they don't need or they cannot enjoy the rights that we have. Yeah? So when for us, I think we need to move out and think out of the box of this migration system that we have. Relook at how governments are depriving vulnerable groups of their basic rights. And for me, we've been advocating for labor mobility, where the worker is able to choose their employment and employer without having the government impose rules and regulations on where they should work, how they should work, when they should get their salaries and not. So for me, I think this is the notion about freedom of want and freedom of fear. The migrant population, the refugee population, the stateless population live in constant fear when they are in another country. They even feel vulnerable in their own country. We have seen internal migration, example even in Bangladesh or even in India, where they are Indian citizens. They migrate to a state in their country, but they don't enjoy the rights as a citizen. So these are all the types of deprivation of rights that the migrants face, internal migrants and migrants who go abroad. So I mean that's the understanding that I have of freedom of want and freedom of from fear. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumita. Two things. I think there are quite a number of keywords that Sumita has mentioned. Basic rights, basic needs, dignity, free from interference, and free from exploitation as well. And that actually explains what it means by freedom from want and freedom from fear. Particular concerns are about freedom from want, from fear of non-citizens, including migrant workers, asylum seekers, refugees, and stateless persons who are living in a society where distinction between us and them seem to be so clear. Thank you very much, Sumita. Our next speaker is Bunthan Tan-Suthep-Virabong. He is currently advisor to the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand. Bunthan will be speaking on that particular head, I guess. And I'm not quite sure if you have PowerPoint, but you have about 12 minutes to address the questions that I asked exactly the same as I asked Sumita earlier. Please, Bunthan.
Thank you so much, 𝗟𝘂𝗖𝗵𝗂𝗏. So thanks to Dr. Parina, the Dean of the Faculty of Law. Thanks to TDI, Dr. 𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and also to the 𝗏 Naumann Stiftung to allow us to be there, to working with you and to share with you now. So as the 𝗟𝘂𝗖𝗵𝗂𝗏 already mentioned, she has several hats. Me also have several hats. So normally I'm the human rights defenders, advocate for some time. So today I'm wearing the hat of the advisor to the National Human Rights Commission. So as cited by the chairperson of the commission, 𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. So I have to be in line with the principle of the commission that I have to speak right now. I'm not going to be the very academics, but maybe more in the pragmatic manners. When we're talking about the freedom from want and freedom from fear, many speakers this morning already mentioned about the State of the Union speech made by Franklin D. Roosevelt, the former president of the United States before the World War II. I mentioned about these 4 freedoms. And of course, I searched this from the Google. He mentioned something that very interesting. It said Franklin D. Roosevelt gave a historic speech to the Congress outlining 4 freedoms for all people: speech, religion, want, and fear. And his speech inspired the Atlantic Charter, a joint declaration of war aimed by himself and Churchill at United Nations, a global organization for peace and collaboration. Actually, I'm not really sure about the joint declaration on war, what it's all about. It's also mentioned about his speech also influenced the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document that affirms the dignity and the right of all human beings, drafted by Eleanor Roosevelt, his beloved wife, 6-7 years later. His speech was widely praised and popularized by Norman Rockwell, who painted 4 iconic images of the 4 freedoms for the Saturday Evening Post or whatever. And it's also mentioned about his speech is considered one of the most influential and visionary speech in American history, and a testament to his leadership vision. Whether you like it or not, that is also written in the Wikimedia under the search of Google. Actually, myself, I heard about the freedom from fear, not the first time, but one of the very interesting things from one of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Aung San Suu Kyi, in 1990s. When she made these essays, also making the speech when she get the Nobel Prize a year later, she mentioned about this, that freedom from fear is both the mention about the 4 akati. 4 akati. Akati is the Buddhist thought. It's mentioned about the related to the question of bias, prejudice, greed, and corruption. She said there are 4 akati which make the people either become the good leader or become the bad leader, either the dictator or authoritarianism. So the first one, she mentioned about Chantakati. In Thailand, we call it Lopha, of greed, bias due to be in favor to the light or love, or that is also related to the question of abuse of power and corruption. The second one is Tosakati. Is bias due to the anger and hate, related to the issue of the matter of the emotional response, uncontrollably. The third one is the Mohakati. Bias due to the loss or ignorance or stupidity. That is also related to the violence reaction against others. The last one, Payakati, is the bias due to the fear, which is also the uncontrolled behavior of anyone. If the people who can handle this matter very well, they might be the good leaders. This based on Aung San Suu Kyi talk in 1990s. If these people behave it incorrectly, then they are the dictator or authoritarian regimes. So that is something very interesting that potentially these all 4 akati reflect in the characteristic of this authoritarianism or dictator, which played a very important role on the human rights violation. So this brings about the kind of human rights violation and committed wrongly against the innocent people or unarmed civilians or non-combatants during the war based on the Geneva Convention, which is the international humanitarian law, which come up a year, 2 years later after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, when talking about the freedom from want and freedom from fear, we have the long path starting from 1945 when the United Nations have been established after the end of the Cold War and the defunct League of the Nations that failed to stop the World War II. Anyway, it's the long journey of human rights and dignity up to today. Starting the end of the World War II and establishment of the United Nations on 24th of October 1945, following by the adoption 3 years later on the Universal Declaration on Human Rights on 10th of December 1948. the first international conference on human rights have been held in Tehran, the capital city of Iran. And that same year also have been announced as the International Year of Human Rights. But how much is this significant? I think we have to find out of it. Then the second World Conference on Human Rights in June 1993, which adopted the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which are marking the 45th anniversary of the Universal Declaration itself. So this is something very interesting in the sense that actually the Vienna Declaration has been used as the text or manual for many human rights advocates in the region in order to pursue the new generation, the new era of the human rights after the end of the Cold War in the 1990s. But 30 years have already passed, but it's also questionable whether the government or state agency, state member party to the United Nations, more than 188 states and countries have been adopted this Vienna Declaration by consensus. Anyway, I'm not going to detail that how the issue on the human rights have been spelled out in the Universal Declaration related to either the freedom from want or freedom from hunger, from fear. But in order to ensure that all these rights, the state have obligation to respect, protect, fulfill, or remedy, making sure that the respective citizen is able to enjoy all the rights enshrined in this international human rights instrument, like the UDHR and also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Economic and Social Rights, and later on. So as I mentioned earlier, the Vienna Declaration Program of Action adopted by more than 188 states on the 25th of June 1993 highlight the universality, indivisibility, and interdependence of human rights, of course, including the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. So many consensus adopted there is not yet really fulfilled, and verse of the verse that it has been ignored by many states still. So some progress after the adoption of the Vienna Declaration is the appointment of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the establishment of the International Criminal Court, born out from the Rome Statute in 1998, which marked the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration, the reformation of the United Nations Human Rights Mechanism, the Human Rights Council later on in 2006, and also so many designation of the various important special procedures of the United Nations allowed, enable the people to access to human rights and justice, but at some extent. But since many of us here on the table are part of the ASEAN community, we are still wondering if the ASEAN is able to deal with these outstanding human rights violation issues. The existence of the 𝗟𝘄 ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights with the limited function and capacity is being questioned by many people, especially civil society, on the seriousness and commitment of the political leaders while voting for a people-centered, a people-oriented ASEAN some time ago. Here in Thailand, the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand received more than 1,000 complaints this year on the human rights issues. Most of the numbers, the big number of the complaints related to the right to criminal justice procedures, the community right, and the right to life and physical safety, unjust discriminations, for instance. So marginalized groups, the minority, indigenous people, urban poor population, workers, refugees, asylum seekers, migrant workers, inmates, and prisoners, those marginalized sectors still being victimized by the state policy and the society. But since the proclamation of the Constitution of 1997, it was the very first time that the human right, the term human right, had been included in the document, in the Constitution. It's the first time after many years. It was also the first time that the National Human Rights Commission had been set up as an independent body or agency in the Constitution. So the threat to human rights here in Thailand is still continuing. So far, as you already heard from our sisters, Mino, the wife of Billy Porajirok Chongchoran, it is clear that the marginalized people always victimized by this situation. So far, more than 105 cases of enforced disappearance, which cannot be resolved yet by either the state or the authorities. More than 2,500 were killed during the World War on Drug campaign in 2003. Still not accountable because independent commission have been set up after that, found out that more than half of this number have nothing to do with the drug narcotic at all. More than 10,000 victims of the violent conflict in the deep South Thailand since 2004. So almost 60 human rights defenders were killed, assassinated, or enforced disappear since 2001. So this includes 𝗏𝗏𝗺𝗏, one of the trade union leaders, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, the human rights lawyers, and of course, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, the leader of the Bangkoi communities of indigenous minority, who is the beloved husband of Bruno and the fathers of the 5 lovely kids that they have. And this is threatening and intimidating the target of the victim and relative of the victim still continuing. So where is the body of Billy? Why is justice? Why is human rights? It's still the question, is it still blowing in the wind? So the right to know the truth is the human right. So did the state done enough to ensure justice and human dignity? This is still the question floating among us. Anyway, early this year, in February 22nd, the Anti-Torture and Enforced Disappearance Act is entering into force here. This is one of the best laws we even had in the last 20 years. It took us almost 16 years to push forward and to advocate this particular law. It is always disrupted and blocked by the security force and those power-corrupted politicians and individuals. Of course, this is one of the important milestones of human rights here in Thailand. The advocacy for human rights has both obstacle and challenge. So the need to change the mindset of society, especially those who are holding power and those who always claim the national security, need to be addressed. So human rights must be a priority rather than the narrow notion of the so-called national security doctrine, which always an excuse for social and political separation. So militarization, corruption, which brought about serious human rights violations. So we need to do a lot more in mainstreaming human rights, less human rights awareness at all levels. Well, I really wonder how many members of the Thai Parliament. There are 750 members together, both Senate and the lower house. How many of them really know or aware about the Universal Declaration and the value of human rights? So this is also our challenge. So profit over human rights is also other existing problem which contribute to inequality and injustice. Dr. Somkiat have already mentioned the widening the gap between the rich and the poor, at some extent. So some minority get much richer while the majority of people get poorer. This is widening the gap between the rich and the poor, of course. UN guiding principle on the business human rights is not yet broadly accepted. Even though Thailand have already announced the second National Action Plan on Business Human Rights early this year, but we have to monitor it closely, how much is going to be the benefit of people in general. Of course, we have many challenges and obstacles. In brief, this year, the National Human Rights Commission had identified some key issues as a priority, especially focused on the right to criminal justice procedures, the question of citizenship, nationality, stateless, and also the community right and environment. Also on the issue, on the key issue on the discrimination, all form of discrimination, and also the domestic violence. But anyway, this is also part of the process that pushing forward to our second National Human Rights Assembly last month that participated by more than 200 people. But anyway, we were able to identify some key issues to move on. So bear in mind the role of the National Human Rights Commission as an independent body mandated by the Constitution. At the regional level, the NHRC also shared the host of the Southeast Asian National Human Rights Institution Forum, or CNF, comprised of 6 existing members in the region, including the Ombudsman from Timor-Leste, with the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand and Myanmar. So last month, we were able to hold the annual assembly of the CNF, and we reaffirmed the commitment to work in collaboration with other key stakeholders such as the 𝗍𝗔𝗍, civil society, and committed international and regional agencies involved in the area of human rights. However, CNF Forum this year have highlighted 4 key priority areas, namely ensuring the human rights and center in a COVID-19 environment. Second, to protect and promote human rights in business. And thirdly, prevent torture and other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. And fourthly, strengthen the CNF itself to the process in order to make sure that the role of the National Commission has been well recognized.
Are you done?
Yes, the last part, Ajahn. In order to address the concern on freedom from fear and freedom from want, so it is rely on the commitment and our common effort to work hand in hand to cope with these challenges. It is not just only the matter of the government or the matter of the National Human Rights Commission or any individual persons. It is our collective effort. So at this significant time for the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, let us stand up and move further to demand our legitimate rights, fundamental freedom, and build up our peaceful and humanized society together and collectively. So all of us has the right to the future. So therefore, the future is ours. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, thank you, Bun Then, for speaking on behalf of the National Human Rights Commission. I think the officers of National Human Rights Commission can report to the chair that he really talked on behalf of the whole commission. I think 2 things which I found quite important from what, of course there are many more, from what Tan had shared with us on behalf of the National Human Rights Commission. The first one is that the UDHR and the international human rights laws put it very clearly that primary responsibility and obligations rest on rest with the state represented by the government. And Bun Then put it very clearly that what kind of leader have a lot to do how people like us can enjoy freedoms from want and freedom from fear. The second one, unfortunately, as of now, despite some progress, including legislation, and this is the case of Thailand, and I guess this is not unique to Thailand, that despite some progress, including on the legislation, policies, and existence of National Human Rights Institution, as well as the network of national human rights institutions in the region, both freedoms remain under threat. And some of, I think, maybe I add the third one, that at least, they have quite clear plan what would be their priorities in the future. When we talk about the future here, I think we tend to talk about shorter future rather than longer future. I mean, in the next 25 years, for example. And I would like to hear from 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, a good friend of mine, 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, former representative to 𝗟R𝗱𝗀 between 2009 until 2016. He is former regional director of the Southeast Asia and the Pacific Amnesty International. He's currently member of the governing board of Human Rights Resource Center for ASEAN at the University of Indonesia. 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏, I guess not only you'll be looking at freedom from want and freedom from fear during the past 75 years, but you'll be looking into the future in the next 25 years as well. And actually, yeah, I know 25 years is long, and some of us, including myself, may not be there. But if you look at our audience, they will be there. They are much younger generation. So you have to, I think, share with them your own vision for the next 25 years, Rafeni. So please, you have 12 minutes to do so.
Thank you very much, Sri Papa. I always call her Sri, I hope it's okay with you. I'd like to thank first, of course, for the invitation on this very important event for myself, and meeting all seniors, and Dr. Fitit and 𝗙𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, the Foreign Minister when ASEAN Human Rights Declaration was adopted back in 2012. And I'd like to thank, of course, the organizers, the Chulalongkorn and 𝗬𝗏𝗏 Working Group on ASEAN Human Rights Mechanisms, a very long-term partner in crime, not partner in crime, partner in positive. And of course, I think all protocol has been observed. Yes, I have prepared some pointers only because I think it's good to have a discussion rather than a very long presentation. After listening to the presentation of keynote speaker this morning, I think it reminds me as well with some points, points on assessing the 75 years of freedom from fear and from want, and two other freedoms. Particular attention we are going to give in this session is on 𝗲 and freedom of expression, and we heard this morning on freedom of expression as well as freedom of religions or beliefs, and we know that there is always a nexus between these two freedoms, particularly on the expressive part of the freedom of religions and beliefs. And then I like also to go to revisit the mechanisms at both UN and the ASEAN. Yeah? A different age, different time, different period. And then go to the emerging and serious threats that we are going to have another 25 years. All right. When we look at the global human rights issues, I look at the research done by Universal Rights, one of the NGOs. They look at all documents in the Human Rights Council as well as the UN system, especially the third committee of the UNGA, which is dealing on human rights, and the Security Councils on issues dealing in human rights. Then they see that we can see on the thematic and human rights issue, what is coming up is it's almost the same that we have been struggling in the 75 years in the global level, and in the region on the basis of the ASEAN Charter, the ASEAN Human Rights Declarations, with all limitation that has been mentioned this morning. It is the same. But I would like to raise as well on the country situation, which was then researched. They draw, the work in if you go to the Universal Rights website, you will see that the top country human rights situation in the world in last year is the war in Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Palestine, and Xinjiang, the smaller one, China, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, the small one, and then very small is Iran and Syria, and there's no mention about the situation in Bangladesh and Myanmar. While the disaster, the atrocities is quite huge. And you see, how do you interpret this kind of situation? Why all the attention, of the world on the country situation is very much given on this particular area where a question of geopolitical domination is there. That's the challenge for us for the coming 25 years. how are we going now to deal with this kind of situation, that we kind of isolated struggles in this part of the world, Southeast Asia, with a very huge atrocities taking place, and we are still feeling the impact of this conflict. Indonesia now we have about 3 weeks, 1,800 distressed people coming down to the shore of Indonesian island in Sumatra. And this is not the first one. It came since 2015, since the Andaman crisis. Yeah? And this thing is happening, and the world doesn't really care about this kind of situation, which all we know, of course we know that this kind of issue cannot be done only by one country or even by a region, no matter you use ASEAN or you use another intergovernmental organization like Bali process. There's very limited you can do to stop these atrocities. It is still going on. We heard as well the testimony of our friend this morning, on one part of the atrocity which is taking place in one member state of the ASEAN. And yes, it is far away, a long way to go to really strengthen this kind of struggle and effort. Now look at the mechanisms, the second point. In the UN pillars, in the TOR of this seminar is highlighted 3 pillars: international security, development, and human rights. And human rights is actually the new pillars brought up by former Secretary General Kofi Annan when the spirit of reform was very strong. Yeah? But then from the TOR, we understand that apparently human rights is a kind of subdued to other issues of international security and development. And you have a very strong UN Charter, very much stronger UN Charter compared to the ASEAN Charter. Yeah? But still, the big challenge is in front of us. Even there is a serious attack on the important international humanitarian law and human rights principles, like the war in Palestine and Gaza. Yeah, is totally disrespect of international humanitarian law. The way states responding to the refugee crisis at the global level is very much in compliances, trying to build up, try to find justification just to stop the flux of the people. So these are the challenges in the next 25 years. The non-discriminations, self-determination, equity and equality, they are all under attack at the global level as well as in our region. In our region, for example, the rights of people on self-determination, the rights of people with different sexual orientation, the rights of people belong to ethnic minority and indigenous people's rights, and the non-discrimination principle, which blatantly violated in our regions on the treatment of asylum seekers, refugees, and migrant workers, which was shared by Sumita. And yes, the equity and equality apparently is not only issue in our countries, where there is a very serious gap of rich and the poor, as it was presented this morning by our friend from TDRI, which also coming up in the so-called advanced democratic country like the US, where the Black Matters lives came into reality. And that discriminations also taking place in Europe, when the flux of immigration from Ukrainian has been treated differently with the flux of the immigration, asylum seeker, refugee coming from Africa, from Afghanistan, from Iraq and Syria. It is a blatant violations of their own principles. So when Sumita is complaining about the government They are the one who is sitting down together with civil society and stakeholders discussing on the regulation of protecting the human rights. At the same time, they are violating human rights at the border, in the migrations, at the shelter of the so-called undocumented migrant workers. It is the situation at the global level. Now, if we look at the mechanisms again, so that means the UN is becoming very ineffective. The UN probably failure to prevent and to stop the war. It's never happened like this. You know, this atrocity which is taking place in Ukraine and then in Gaza and Palestine. Look at the Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council is supposed to be the one of member state intergovernmental organizations protecting or trying to protect rights of the people at the global level. And we see the practice that clean slate membership pledges of countries are very much fake because they are not accepted because of the record on human rights they have, but they are accepted because of the pledges, which is an empty pledges. And the other one is the challenge on the issue of effectiveness of the mechanisms. The special rapporteur mechanisms, the treaty bodies. This afternoon, probably we hear about our friend who is sitting now in the treaty bodies. Yeah? But still, the existing mechanisms having a very serious challenge. I can recall you the example of Special Rapporteur on adequate housing. Yeah? Madame Ronick from Brazil, who has been actually seriously attacked, harassed when he was doing a country visit to UK or England, in looking at the right of housings. Yeah? As if the human rights violation is not taking place in the countries, the so-called democratic countries. It happens, it's very rampant, as the same right violations which is taking place in the US in terms of adequate housing, which has a very much relation with other rights, education, health, as well as livelihood. ASEAN has a vision since 2008 when ASEAN Charter was there, and then ASEAN 2009-2015 has a roadmap for the ASEAN community, and then there is a master plan on ASEAN connectivity. Now we are entering the new vision of ASEAN. And if we look at the promises and the commitment 10 years ago, that they affirm ASEAN resolved to continue along the path of regional integration, intended to be expansive for ASEAN agenda to better respond and adapt changes in the coming years. And the key word of the ASEAN community, deepening and strengthening. But in reality, what we see, inequality continues to rise despite the promise of the ASEAN regional integration. People are worried with the disappearance of human rights defenders, the acceleration of death penalty execution, the growing exploitation of migrant workers, about the fragile peace processes, and the dangers of unmitigated free trade agreements, which then affect the environmental human rights defenders in our region. That 10 years, after 10 years, 14 years after ASEAN Development Research, it doesn't mean that ASEAN doesn't achieve anything. Yes, there is kind of achievement as the result of people, civil society, people struggling both from outside and from inside. From inside, I'm coming from somebody from outside and entering the government. From inside, of course, there is some incrementally ways of progress. I stop in 1 minute. We have more participation. We have more people joining the movement of the ASEAN People Society Conference, or APF, and the civil society were able to give input to a lot of documents in the ASEAN, starting from the blueprints, the charter, the TOR, the Declaration of Human Rights, and the review of the TOR and all. And finally, even the drafting of the action plan, the Bohol Action Plan, which is addressing the transnational crimes in this region, drafting the violence against women and children's action plan, a lot of participation of civil society, which was never taking place before 10 years ago. The threat in the 25 years, I already mentioned for that, long process on the peaceful settlement of internal conflict within member states, which has human rights impact, not only at the national level, but also regional security. People smuggling, TIP based on technology is a kind of a new threat we never had before. It's a kind of post-pandemic crimes that states are a bit unable to respond effectively to these online scams, even denying it at the first time, that online scam is happening in our free trade zone. Yeah? So free trade, they have all facilities, so nothing happened. But finally, after some pressure, then finally they recognize it is a crimes that has to be addressed in collaborative ways. Threats to freedom of religions and belief, freedom of expression, manifested in the digital authoritarianisms. It is also something new. We don't have that before, digital authoritarianisms. Yeah? But now we feel it. We really feel it and experience it. Even people got arrested because just a statement in the Facebook, a statement just tagging a comment you have to deal with the Court of Justice. Yeah? So that's the challenge for us in the next 25 years. And I hope that we can still be there, like we have a good example of Kun Kasit, who is always struggling for the enforcement of human rights. Thank you so much. I thought I'd take 8 minutes, it's 15 minutes, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Fendi, but I think you cover many things, including the current situation mechanism that we have, both at international, at UN and ASEAN level. Unfortunately, according to what you said, they seem not to be as effective as we want. Especially the UN mechanism could not, prevent or stop atrocities which are currently going on in different hotspots of different corners of the world. In ASEAN, I think I find it quite interesting, although we talk about the effectiveness, the ineffectiveness of the existing ASEAN human rights system, but still you find, some space. For example, space for CSO and existing human rights documents. I think the challenge is actually how to turn what we have, into implementation. And the last one, which I think will be there for the next 25 years, is what you call digital authoritarianism. And this is something completely new to us. And I think it's really for the next generation to deal with the issue of digital threat, or what Prof. Fendi called digital authoritarianism. So think it by now, because I think it's so hard to run after, this digital authoritarianism. We are having another speaker online, 𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗏 from Myanmar, and I think she is actually more than qualified, to talk about freedom from want and freedom from fear. Some of you may know 𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗏 already. She is a Burmese democracy activist noted for her leadership, in 8888 uprising in 1988. She is currently chairperson of the Progressive Voice Advisory Board. Kin Oma will be briefly intervening, in our panel. Oma, if you are ready, please join us online. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn. I'm online. Yes. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Sadika, good afternoon, good morning to all the colleagues. Thank you for having me. Ajahn 𝗟𝗏, thank you so much for having me to join this today very important discussion. I have listened to the other speakers and also kind of looking into the Burma-Myanmar context and reflecting. So I would like to share some of my thoughts. And I know, Ajahn, you told us that maybe it would be difficult perhaps to look into the more comprehensive answers to the discussion, the topic that we're discussing today. But allow me to also make a couple of concrete recommendations at the end. I think, as the today's topic, of course, as we celebrating the 75th anniversary of the UDHR, we all are very well aware, as we have already heard from other panelists as well, is the four freedoms. The concept of the four freedoms are what inspired the UDHR, as we all refer to in our human rights work. But then, of course, as the time passed by, and now we're facing the unprecedented crisis across the globe, and also in our region, particularly our country, my country, Burma, Myanmar. I think that gave us the chance to reflect and look also, are these only four freedoms that we should be inspired and continue to advance our cause for human rights, and particularly the protection of human rights. And of course, there are more, as we are already looking into the different contexts and crises. What about the freedom to lead? What about the freedom to self-determination? In case of Myanmar, it's not only to end the military tyranny that suppressed the people for the past 70 years, 7 decades. It's 3 generations, pretty much. But also, we're looking into, in this time, beyond that ending the military tyranny, what about also for our people's chance to lead our country? And also for our diverse ethnic and religious minority communities, also have a chance to not only lead their communities, but also to have a chance and the right to determine for their community's development and humanitarian aid. In this regard, we need to also look at the big aid, big international actors who are coming in with expertise and knowledge, and also the formula and also the money, which impose on local communities' resilience, and in fact even harm their local resilience and local knowledge and values. I think these are many other things that we need to look into. And of course, in today's world, even we know for sure that these 3 rights listed in the UDHR are no longer sufficient. I think that's something that I would like to stress here, especially in our country's context, for the ethnic and religious minorities whose basic rights and basic needs being deprived for so long by generations. But to come back to the focus for today, I'd like to share some of the reflections on the freedom from want and freedom from fear. As we know, the freedom from want is to address these certain groups who actually are taking over all the resources, have the privilege and all, while actually depriving the others, the rest, from their basic needs. I think this is very clear case for Burma, Myanmar at this point, especially as the whole country population are facing unprecedented violence from the military, not only the physical violence, but also the violence of being deprived from the humanitarian emergency aid, deprived from having a chance to have the basic health services. So I think these are the things that we are looking into. So what we're seeing in Myanmar is the military take it all for themselves, for their families, and for their cronies, and this elite club. And that is the situation where the people of Myanmar, especially the young generation, for the past almost 3 years, more than 1,000 days, non-stop, struggling to end this military's impunity, staying above the law, taking everything from the whole country, and while killing the people. The freedom from fear comes along with that, is that also the people of Myanmar, as they are resisting this illegal, violent military trying to take over the country, they are actually making all these unprecedented sacrifices and efforts to push back and resist and try to end this military tyranny and impunity. While people struggle so hard, but at the same time facing such unprecedented violence from the military, people of Myanmar, for the last 3 years at least, being deprived from their daily night sleeps, try to hide from the military arrest, try to hide from the military's area bombardment. If you go to Mae Sot, the border town in Thailand, you will hear these trembling, sound from the other side, where this military is basically using airstrikes, bombarding almost every day. So we're talking about, along with that, is this lack of human security. In the last 3 years' time of the course, the Myanmar military already destroyed more than 76,000 properties, including the whole villages, burned down to ashes. There's series of massacres, where more than 10 people, 20 people, the villagers, elderly, pregnant women are being shot and killed and burned alive, where the young women are being raped and gang raped and killed. So this pervasive fear, of course, can cut the generations out of society through the malnutrition, through this, trauma, and being unable to even have this basic needs on their daily survival. So I think we're facing in ASEAN, the Myanmar crisis is something that the whole region should not ignore but address collectively, because otherwise, Burma crisis is a testament, right? It is a litmus test for ASEAN, whether the ASEAN is capable of, as a regional bloc, and not only to address the crisis, but also to actually move forward. So I think we are dealing with this current situation where we have, for example, more than 2 million people in Myanmar are already internally displaced. As you can imagine, how many of them already been, come across the border into the neighboring countries, of course, Thailand first. And I think that ASEAN, when they keep going with this 5-point consensus to address Myanmar crisis, they are not able to address any of these human sufferings, not able to stop the military violence. So I think we're facing this challenge with this ASEAN continuing with this failed 5-point consensus. What do we do? And as Myanmar people, of course, we try. The civil society, we try. But I think we need so much of your support as we come already almost 3 years of this unprecedented violence. These atrocities must stop. I think we really seek and look up to your leadership, especially the people in Thailand, the civil society, the academics, and the human rights bodies. We need you to help us, because we just read in my last point that I want to share with you is when it comes to the freedom from fear, the Myanmar people live with so much fear in their country. with so much courage at the same time, but also those who had to flee because of that lack of security in their country, flee into Thailand. They also need temporary protection from Thai authorities, Thai government. And Thai government just announced this forming the aid task force with Myanmar. And when the Thai government say with Myanmar, we all got freaked out. There's a worry and fear already arise like immediately. Why? It's because one, a country government called Myanmar, we are already alerted. Is it the military junta who is killing and bombing the people and raping the people? Or is it the legitimate government of Myanmar that the Thai government will work with for the human security and protection of Myanmar people and the aid? I think this is something that we would like to call for your support to help us communicate to the Thai government that they cannot work with the military junta if they want to help and protect the people of Myanmar who are in desperate need of human security.
Thank you.
I think that
Thank
basic.
you. Thank
so
you.
much of that.
Omar, thank you for your interventions. Although her name was not included in the program, but I really feel the need for us to hear, from someone from Myanmar, especially after February coup d'etat in 2022. And I think what Omar has shared with us shows very clearly that people in Myanmar, regardless of their ethnicities, have been living under oppression for so long. So, talking about enjoyment of the four freedoms are far from reality, and in the context of Myanmar, right to self-determination is the key. And I think that this message was made very clear by Omar. The second thing, and I think it's also important to reiterate, which is about the future for the current and the next generations in Myanmar. It looks like their future is completely uncertain. And of course, the issues, the challenges, the problems in Myanmar require a collective solution, and collective solution could come from ASEAN, but I'm afraid that is not the case. Of course, Thailand should be able to play a more active role in addressing the issue, not only, I think, not much about inside Myanmar, but at least accommodating those, fleeing across the borders. And this is really something that the Thai government could do, not pushing them back. Thank you very much, Omar. It's now, actually, we are quite behind the schedule, but I feel that I really need to, I feel obliged to open space for questions and comments, maybe 7 minutes. Now it's 12:42. If we go for 8 minutes, it will be 10:50. We are actually behind schedule since the very beginning. But still, I would like to accommodate a few questions or comments from the audience. Please, ค่ะ ท่านทุตกสิทธิ์ you have microphone before you. Okay, I think with this question, we'll be having only one question. Sumita, would you like to, maybe in 1 or 2 minutes, assessing the leadership that we have in the region? And you do not need to go one by one, but at least some of them, please.
Well, I think I just can speak on behalf of my own country, because I live in that country and we work with the government officials. But I work on migration, on migrant workers issues and domestic worker issues. But I can say that any government that comes into power in Malaysia does not have the political will to deal with the mess that the migration system has created in Malaysia. Does not have the political will. Even in the ASEAN level, and we must understand that in ASEAN level there are three stumbling blocks when it comes to migrant worker issues. One is the principle of non-interference, and then the principle of sovereign state, and the fact that and also the fact that the governments do not want any document that is binding. You know, every document that you see in the ASEAN is non-binding. So you can see the political will of the states. And I must say that, and I'm very disappointed to say that all the documents pertaining to migration in the ASEAN level, the Declaration on Migrant Workers, the consensus documents on migrant workers, everything, the stumbling block was Malaysia, and also maybe like Singapore, and you know, but for me, I think it's very difficult for us to move forward in migration in terms of where any government, for that matter, that comes into power. So, although we welcome this government, you know, because it was Anwar Ibrahim, we wanted to change. We thought that, okay, so we're going to have a government that is a little bit more sympathetic, because they were sympathetic as an opposition, but that did not happen. That did not happen, and I'm deeply disappointed in terms of my work that I do. So we are still struggling when it comes to migrant workers. So that's my assessment of the government. Even if I think if another government comes next year or a year after or whatever, we will still have the same issues in place. I do not know what is going to take, what change needs to be, or what
recording in progress.
What needs to be happen in the country before they can actually make the change for migrant workers. You know, do they need to see what do they need to see that the contribution that the migrant workers make to the development of the country? I'm not sure what it is. But at the moment, all we do in the country is, you know, advocate for their rights. We do firefighting with the government, case management, things like that. And I must say that it's not only, it's also because the struggle is also the fact that other countries in other regions, in the Western countries, regions like in the Middle East, also treat their migrant workers very, very badly. So I feel like everybody is in the same boat and everybody doesn't want to do anything about it. Yeah.
You have 1 minute to address that big question.
Yes, thank you. The big question from Ambassador Kassim. Actually, I couldn't respond this as the National Human Rights Commission advisor. So this is my personal view.
You now respond as Bun Tan.
Now, my personal view.
Would be
in
more
ASEAN, 10, 11 countries, we have the broad range of the political system, starting from absolute monarchy to semi-democracy, pseudo-democracy, transition democracy. I don't know if we have the full democracy at the moment. But anyway, what is important have been elaborated by Sumita, my colleagues, in the movement. No? We have been working together on the migrant issue. There is a matter of political view of the leaders. If the 10 countries have 10 different systems, and we cannot expect much what ASEAN is going to be, because in the meantime, ASEAN is just going to be the lip service at some extent in order to mention to focus on the human rights. That is also something very, very cunning in a sense. But if asking what we really expect to the ASEAN government is, we really need the democratic governance of all these 10, 11 countries in ASEAN in order to move forward, to get the new generation of the ASEAN communities, I don't know, in the next 5 years, 10 years, or wherever, whatsoever. That is also important. So I think that's the reason why the SDG goal 16 is also quite important, that we have to pay much more attention. The SDG goal 16 is regarding the peace, justice, strong institutions, especially on the democratic governance, which unless we are not going to work on this, then ASEAN is going to move to nowhere. So thank you.
Thank you, Tan. Ravindi, 1 minute, please. Yeah.
Okay. As the biggest democracy in Southeast Asia.
Oh, that's what you claim.
in terms of numbers of voters, 200 million people. Well, we have three choices. Three choices, three candidates, vice president and president. One candidate is still the perpetrators of human rights violations, which is not yet finalized the accountability process. So impunity goes on, despite of the fact democracy is taking place. So democracy does not always deliver. So when we say, okay, let's have democracy, when you got democracy, it does not always deliver, especially when you're addressing the crime of impunity. Yeah? General Prabowo was getting very much emotional when he was asked during the first debate of the candidate about what is he going to do, whether you would like to establish a human rights court when you are elected as president. He didn't answer the question. He was getting emotional and blaming, why me, why me? And there are so many people disappeared, they said. So that's one option. The second option is in between. If the second one will win, Ganjar Pranowo and Mahfud has a very good professional record with some of the limitation. But the party is really, really going down. They're not going to be the majority anymore. So if they win, they will have to face a very serious threat from the opposition. Or they will choose by asking them to join the cabinet. So you have a majority, like what Jokowi did when he then asked General Prabowo to become his minister. The third one, that's the worst scenario from the perspective of rights, because then we will be trapped. It is already evidence-based result of 2019, where people are divided. People are really divided between the most, the one who is in favor of conservatisms, radicalisms, on religions, and the other one that believe on rebels ideas, progressive democratization, and so forth. So three options. Depends on February 2024. That will be the day of the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravindi. It seems that the three options do not provide any option.
That's true. That's why I don't vote.
I guess, my conclusions would be based on the answer to the big question. The first one, currently, no leaders deal with issues, especially, migration systematically. We don't see any political will from any particular leaders. So there is a need for a paradigm shift. The second one is actually in ASEAN, in South Asia, we are seeing varying types of democracy and varying political space, in the region, in different countries. And this makes it impossible or difficult to better promotion and protection of rights in the region. The fourth one, I think since this morning, we touched upon the issue of democracy. Democracy is there in form, in my opinion, but not really in substance. And this has serious impacts on the enjoyment of rights. And the last one, impunity, which has been there in all countries without any exception. And for me, and I guess for us, impunity is a serious enemy of freedom from want and freedom from fear. With that, I would like to thank all speakers for sharing us on this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. 𝗖𝗂𝗏 and all the speakers from panel session 1. A little bit of logistics. The lunch box is provided on the 5th floor, so you walk 1 floor up, and then it will provide lunch boxes, a couple of choices, so you choose based on your preferences. Halal is also available, so please let the staffs know about your dietary requirements. We shall come back, since we are running behind the schedule, may I ask you to come back at like 1:35, like 20 minutes after the schedule, 1:35, at least some attempt, so we can start sooner. So thank you very much and see you in 40 minutes.